You've spent years building your business. Late nights, tough calls, real sacrifice. When it's time to sell, you deserve an advisor who understands what that journey actually means, not just what's on the balance sheet. Transworld Business Advisors has helped thousands of owners exit on their own terms, with confidential worldwide marketplace exposure to find the right buyer. Visit tworld.com today. Transworld Business Advisors. Good deals, good people.
Meet Keith, loving dad, board game champ, bus driving pro.
I drive 65,000 miles in my bus each year. If people knew what I know, lives could be saved. Like how there are some things I simply can't see. On my route the other day, a car tried to sneak past me and ends up right in my blind spot. I turned slowly, so accident avoided. But no car should be in the blind spot for a 40,000-pound bus. It's our roads. It's our safety.
Visit www.sharetheroadsafely.gov.
Hey, Adam. You ready to go back to the South Pacific?
I'm really excited to go back to the South Pacific. I have a lot of bones to pick with high school teachers yet again.
Usually, when we've been in the area of the South Pacific, we're either talking about World War II or we're talking about white people fucking around, taking a bunch of stuff, spices, things like that. But we get to actually talk about some natives in the neighborhood. We haven't been to Cambodia. Have we done anything Cambodia related?
I can't think of much because I don't even know. I think VOC was more like Sri Lanka in the Indies.
And Java
instead of going up into Cambodia. So this is the first time we're going to touch Cambodia.
Isn't Cambodia fun? Cambodia is just Cambodia.
It's fun. It's a shockingly beautiful place.
It is. I showed my wife a picture of it, and she goes, "That's real."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yeah, that's real." And a lot of you have seen Cambodian ruins. If you've seen the OG Tomb Raider with Angelina Jolie back before we found out, all the craziness,
that's almost fun.
Yes,
it's
they're the
more fun.
ruins that have like the banyan trees, right?
Yep.
The banyan trees that are like growing over and it looks like holding the stone, almost like it's like natural. I meant like they meant to have it like that. But these are ruins that are part of this Khmer Empire that ruled Cambodia and a large portion of these other countries for like 400 years?
That's 6.
But leaving behind these ruins like Angkor Wat, also the city of Angkor, they're gorgeous. They're so, what am I trying to say? Like unique.
They're planned, they're well thought out, and then they have a kind of flair and a spice that during this time we're going to be talking about. This is the medieval times.
Yeah. The Renaissance is literally starting in England, and this is going on here. And this is a place, Cambodia is a place where you get this, all of it makes sense how this empire actually rises and falls. It's so easy to follow it, but what happens in between its rise and its fall is just cool shit that they're building these things that are now UNESCO, World Heritage sites, and they get millions of visitors every year. And again, most people, if they took a look at it, or they, picture a ruin, a jungle ruin in your head, this is exactly what you would picture. And it's so fucking cool.
It's also a stark contrast to anything that we've talked about in Europe around this time, because these are Eastern religions. We're dealing with Hinduism and Buddhism, kind of is the two main branches here. And so I guess maybe it's because they are polytheistic and there's more gods that they can pray to. This isn't like the Crusades where it's for God and glory and taking back the homeland.
God wills it!
God wills it! These are Indian religions that have been transported into Southeast Asia. And while still feeling very new in the regions that they're taking over, these are very old religions that date back a really, really long time with established mythology and lore Some of the Hindu stuff feels very Greek, so I would be very curious to go back and kind of do like a time comparison. Because, I mean, we have a mountain that has the Hindu gods on it, very much like Mount Olympus.
I'm trying to remember what episode we talked about it in, but there was a episode. It was about certain, maybe it might have been immortality. And we were talking about the myths of something that was in China, and it talked about like the Sea of Milk or something like that. And I can't remember exactly or maybe that was like, what was it, hare's breast milk that was sprayed up into the sky and created like constellation of the Milky Way. But the areas that they're going to find, eventually these ruins and everything, these things are basically just, what am I trying to say? Like libraries with no books in them. The walls are the library. Like it tells the intricacy of the carvings and the amount of them it kind of like makes you think, did they build this just to be able to like have a canvas for this stuff?
Yeah. They needed a bunch of blank walls to do shit on, so they made the blank walls as cool as could be before they started carving them.
What we need this to look so fucking cool that from a distance you see it and like, I got to get closer. And then when you get there, now we tell you the story.
And a lot of these histories are I would almost say victim to their climates, because whereas you have papyrus scrolls in different areas that are kind of more dry, we're going to have a lot more history back then than just carvings and reliefs. When you're talking about Southeast Asia and just specifically the Khmer Empire, so much of this was written on palm leaves. And if it wasn't copied down 100 years later, these palm leaves were just going to disintegrate because of the climate that they're in. So we have to rely on a lot of sources outside of the Khmer Empire, just their dealings back and forth with these places, and China coming down with envoys. And then we have, like you're saying, just walls. Walls that we have to translate.
Yeah, because they lasted, because this isn't a place that's like, hey, we have a spring, a summer, a fall, a winter. This is like, hey, this is wet season when we get our monsoons, and then this is dry season. Before we get too far into it, remember patreon.com/historicallyhigh. Go get the bonus content.
5-star ratings. We love seeing them. That number keeps climbing. Reviews have been excellent. Chris and I had just put out fairly recently 2 teaching episodes, both that I think we were excitedly nervous to see the receptions to. And the reviews and comments that we've gotten about them have just been, it's super. It's fun. It's fun to see a grouping of people that latch on to something that you really enjoy too. Keep subscribing. We're very, very close to 30,000 subscribers on Spotify, it's just cool. It's a fun thing to say. 30,000 of you guys are subscribing to listen.
It's like perfect game.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
All right. Is it time to go into the Khmer?
The what?
I was about to say the Khmer Rouge, but we'll talk about how that comes about later.
Exactly. This is just going to be the normal Khmer Empire. So the Khmer Empire is, again, centered in modern-day Cambodia. It lasted from the official start time, or start date, was 802 in the Common Era, up to, 1431, I think, right? So it had like you said, little over 600 years.
Which is a hell of a run for an empire.
Think of it also in the sense of, what China's going through with dynasties and things like that. They're just, again, in Southeast China, which means that when China wants to expand, they're eventually going to come down and conquer you.
Yeah, they're going to eventually stop looking for trading partners and start looking for vassal states. For them to be able to hold off for so long, and the Khmer Empire that we're going to be talking about, is born out of kind of this loose collection of, I guess you could call them city-states, maybe principalities is probably a better term.
Territory, like, yeah, whatever, yeah.
And these were formerly kind of this grouping of this Khmer Empire before you start seeing these other countries, these other empires come in. Kind of in the general area just around Cambodia, what they're dealing with is the Srivijaya and the Selandia, which was the Sumatran and the Javanese dynasties, that are these strong maritime powers that held so much power over this Malay Peninsula and then southern Cambodia, because those were the solid mainlands that they were going to go into. So you have the control out on the water from them. You also have the Kingdom of Champa, which is situated kind of along the central and southern coasts of what's modern-day Vietnam now. Major rival for the Khmers that we're going to be talking about during this episode. You have the Davarti, which were to the west of kind of present-day Thailand. Then you had the Dai Viet, and this was northern Vietnam. They had just broken free of the Tang dynasty in China, like you were talking about. The crazy thing about this is the Dai Viet and the Champa that share Vietnam now are broken pretty close to that line that we were fighting over in Vietnam. So, like
it's an ancestral, like, heritage.
Yeah. It's an area that has been in shifting power sources that communism was coming for 1,000 years. I mean, just so long that these two warring parts of Vietnam were at each other's throats. There was a ruler that comes along named Jayavarman. He was somewhat of I think from kind of what I saw, and maybe you saw something similar or different, he was almost like a child of diplomats that had spent time abroad. Is that kind of the reading that you got on it?
Yeah, so what ends up happening is a little bit before Jayavarman, and a lot of these names are going to sound very similar because I can't remember what the etymology or how they broke it up was, but Varman is like a title that almost just goes along. You just get the first part of it, and then Varman is what goes on the end of it.
Varman is essentially, I believe it translates over into like God's shield.
It's shield. And so people just kept taking something and then shield. Holy shield, people's shield, or whatever it was, like eagle shield. Like, it was just a contest to see who could come up with the coolest thing. Before the empire kind of is actually born, the Khmer people actually belonged to these two states, like the two main states. I think one of them was, I believe it was Phenan, that was located on the Mekong Delta. And from like a geographical standpoint, Cambodia, there's so many rivers that come off of the Himalayas that are these major rivers in the world. And the Mekong is actually one of those rivers that comes from the Himalayas, and it almost splits Cambodia right down the middle.
12th largest river in the world. I want to say it runs through China, Vietnam, Cambodia.
The delta is in Vietnam, right? Because remember, you always hear in Vietnam, we're going in the goddamn Mekong Delta. So with that going right through the heart of Cambodia, that also allows for like a ton of trade and all that kind of stuff. So you have almost an inland people, and then you have people that are what you would consider closer to the rivers.
Seafarers and riverfarers?
I mean, you don't even really have the seafarers because you don't have all the area around you is from somebody else. So like Cambodia is kind of almost locked a little bit as far as like landlocked, just in the sense that Vietnam is on that one side, keeping them away from the ocean. Then they have, I think, Thailand. Is it Thailand on the other side?
I believe so.
That keeps them away on the other side. So they're a river people, and that's going to influence like how they do warfare and all of that. The second type of people is the Chenla. And so the Funan were located along the Mekong Delta. They were the maritime trading states. They were the first ones, or one of the first ones, to kind of absorb the Indian political philosophy. They had the Sanskrit because that was also something that was being used. Hinduism and Buddhism, basically just from all the trade with India. The Chenla were inland, And so rather than being a more unified nation, they were that loose confederation that you were talking about of like the competing principalities or states or whatever it was. Now, that had basically resolved itself eventually into like two main competitors, which was the water Chenla, they said, which were the coastal ones, and then the land Chenla, which were the more inland ones. So during the late 8th century, these raiders that were on the rivers or on the seas basically formed this thing called the Shalindra dynasty. It was based in Java, which is modern-day Indonesia, and they end up invading the, like, kind of fractured water Chenla.
The southern Chenla.
Correct. The ones that were more like, weren't like really unified. It was the inland ones that were more unified. So they basically execute like a bunch of local lords. They take control of the region, and a lot of people that were nobles in that area, because they needed those people to still run the land and pay them taxes and everything. They basically turned them into political prisoners to ensure their compliance. Jayavarman was actually one of those captured nobles.
I could see the captured nobles. And maybe I'm just thinking it. Maybe it's just different in the East, but this is almost a little bit like Caesar traveling down to wherever he was going to travel to when he gets taken by the pirates to go learn in another country.
Yeah, because he's able to return.
Yeah,
back. Yeah,
and his return is. I would say that it's a master class in how to take over an area. I mean, he raises an army. This army begins to conquer territories, moving up the Mekong River from southeast Cambodia up into the northwest. The principalities that he couldn't conquer, he needed to get them to recognize him. So in order to do that, when you have this Indianization of the area of Southeast Asia, it's not just the political, or it's not just the religions that comes over. It's not just, the culture. It's the same caste system that's in India as well. So you're going to have a hierarchy where you're going to have Hindu Brahmin that are kind of sitting at the top of the hierarchy because Hinduism was more of a bourgeoisie type religion. And you're going to have a higher concentration of Buddhists down into more of the peasant classes.
Gotcha. So the proletariat.
Yeah. So if you can get a hold of the...
Wait, so... Fuck, I don't want to make a generalization, but is...
We make plenty on this podcast.
I
Go
know.
ahead. Knock yourself out.
No, I know. This is a pre-warning. I'd like to...
Before you get that pre-warning out, this is the first episode of the new Bubbler, and so we're kind of testing out the...
It hits hard.
Yeah, the rips per minute type.
So is Hinduism just fancy upscale Buddhism? Or am I reversing that?
I think Buddhism is a far more peaceful religion. I think they're a lot more laid back because you have the Buddha, who seems like more of a chill guy than the Vishnu
the chill
that
guy
has
is the
6
proletariat.
arms.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Gotcha.
I mean, it's the bourgeoisie are always going to make the proletariat fight for them.
Yeah.
So you would think that the proletariat would be less inclined to fighting.
Yeah,
because they don't want to do it. But in order to get a hold of these upper castes, what Jayavarman does is he travels to Mount Mahenda Pavarata, which is known as Phnom Kulen, and he takes a Hindu Brahmin with him. And they perform this sacred rites ceremony that makes him a Davaraja.
All this guy does, and this is not me poo-pooing on their founder myths or anything like that, but... if you were to just see, I sometimes see this through a cinematic lens where I see this as a movie. And so then I look at it and I say, well, like, what's he doing? What he's doing is he's like, okay, I'm trying to kind of unite all these people. I came back from being a political prisoner to the, whatever it was in Java. So now I'm getting all these people together, but some of them won't listen to me because they're not viewing me in the way that their system puts me in the right light. I guess I'm not at the right level for them to listen to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a guy with me. I'm going to hike up to this sacred mountain and I'm going to perform this ritual, which turns me into it was, like you said, it was the Devaraja, but it was also the Chakravartin, or universal ruler, and leader of the Devaraja cult, which was the God King. So, because I'm doing this ritual, somehow it works, because word gets around that someone has done the God King ritual. And so when they're going around to these other kingdoms and everything like that, they're like, have you heard this guy did the God King ritual? And the guy's like, no. Who? What? They're like, yeah, someone went up to the mountain and did the God King ritual. He's like, well, like any of us could have done that? And like, he went and did it, so he was the one that did it. He must be the guy. And they're like, well, fuck.
It's a pretty good point.
Hold on.
He was the first guy that really thought of this.
That's what I'm fucking saying. And then guess what?
It's right there for everybody else.
Enough of the people. All you got to do is have enough to make, to get the others on your side, right? All he has to do is have a few of them gullible enough to be like, oh shit. I mean, he wouldn't have been able to do that had he not been the guy to do it, right?
Yeah, the Hindu Brahmin wouldn't have gone up there with him unless he saw that he was worthy.
Fucking course he wouldn't have. So he's got to be legit. So now this guy has established himself, not only himself, but then, of course, his line, his lineage going forward. You guys are all going to be under a God King.
Yeah. He does the next logical thing for a king. He establishes this capital city at Hariharalea. And then from there, he goes on to unite maybe anybody that's still kind of maybe questionable through these very strategic marriages and these diplomatic ties by 802 CE.
Well, yeah, God still has pieces to move on the chessboard.
Yeah, he's just in case they're not all in on the Devaraja deal, we got to try to work our way in.
When divine power fails, make a marriage alliance, and pussy's always good.
Yep.
that currency spends in any culture at any point in time.
Recession proof.
Yes.
So as he's collecting this
that was
area,
a compliment to any of our female listeners as well. Like
you should know your power.
Yep.
And know that we know your power as well, and that we're
at the whims of your power.
So he solidifies the cult control of the region. He establishes more capitals that double as these economic centers in the region. And he would end up reigning over this Khmer Empire until 850 was the number that I got. Now, everything that we just pulled for the original Devaraja, Jayavarman II, first very strategic thing that he does, before the breakup into these principalities, the last king that they had, the last king of the Chenla, I believe, was Jayavarman the first. So you're continuing that line with something that somebody already knows about.
Yeah, it was when the name Kennedy used to actually mean something. That's kind of what it was, right?
Yeah. Now it's just a bad punchline, but yeah.
Yeah.
So as he's collecting these, all this history that we just talked about comes from this one carving that they found like 200 years later. Mm-hmm. So the whole origin story of the Khmer Empire comes from one inscription that was written 200 years afterwards.
When we start discussing the size of these sites and all of the carvings, it's going to make sense because what we just described was a pretty intensive, long story. There's going to be room for it and so much more.
And it's the fact that we're going into the richest empire during this period, during the medieval period. Mm-hmm. And that's the origin story. We have one inscription for the origin story of one of the greatest empires ever.
Yeah.
That's nuts.
That explains to you. That's why of course you're never going to learn a lesson from these, but this just shows you how advanced an empire can get very, very quickly, but how it can get snuffed out very, very quickly. Without a lot of rhyme or reason.
And it doesn't matter where these empires happen. Mm-hmm. They fall because of really a lot of the same reasons. So this is the fall of an empire is pretty much universal. And when we talk about the reasons why the Khmer Empire falls, you're like, oh yeah, that sounds like a lot of these other empire episodes that you were talking about.
So one of the reasons he ends up moving his the capital city down to you please say it?
Hariharalea.
Hariharalea. It's also chosen because of its proximity to the Tonlé Sap Lake, which is the largest lake in Cambodia, correct?
Tonlé Sap it's big and little all at the same time.
It depends on the time of year. So it has this proximity to the lake because he understands that the only way that your population grows is if you have a food source that can support the population. That's going to come in such an enormous, that's like their bread and butter when it comes to this. And so he ends up kind of using the rest of his reign, that 48 years that Jayavarman number 2 reigns. He ends up securing the borders for the empire, training a professional standing army, and then also basically integrating all of those people that he had to bring in through alliances and stuff like that into more of like a centralized bureaucracy where he's able to basically keep an eye on everything. Have the day-to-day shit run so he can ride around on his fucking armored elephant with the gold sword and all that stuff. That's true shit that happened.
That might be the one reason that I'm very angry that history teachers didn't teach us about this, is because at the same time that we're talking about knights on horseback in Europe, these guys are fighting on war elephants.
I know.
How much cooler of a story.
You're on a horse. Cool.
Yeah, which...
And it's got, some of these things would have like blades strapped to their tusks. And listen, this was horrible abuse for the elephants. But come on, war elephants. This just meant that elephants could fight back against the people that were harassing them. But like they would put platforms on the back of these things and have like spearmen and archers and all this shit.
And it's, if you fall off of a horse, probably not fun.
Buddy,
armor.
There is a reason. There is a direct inspiration that Mr. Tolkien himself got for the Marmakill or whatever they were called, the elephants that were in Lord of the Rings, and it was this stuff.
Setting up all of these centers too, and these economic centers, and making sure that all that happens. The tax system is such an interesting thing to go into because they didn't have any money. They didn't have any coins. These were just families that were of a higher caste in those areas that would kind of become like these provincial landholders or chieftains. Mm-hmm. And their favor that they would gain would be solely dependent on the amount of taxes that they could give the church, which was the state at that point in time.
Right.
So you have these competing kind of landholder chieftains that are trying to gain favor with Jayavarman II by saying, hey, we produced X amount of this. That's more than we produced last year, and that's more than this capital, and this capital. Mm-hmm. And all of this money is flowing into these capitals. It's being paid out in taxes to the state or to the religion. And then you start to see the change of like, hey, we have more money in the system in this area. Let's build some cooler temples there. Let's start making these areas different by adorning them with all of these different temples to the different gods. And that way it's like a physical representation that this area is better than this area because they have more money spent in their capital city, basically.
Yeah, they were trying to flex.
Mm-hmm. But
temple flex.
Also, that competition just breeds more competition. Mm-hmm. And everybody benefits except for all of the people that are the slave labor that are being forced to do that.
You mean that are being forced to not question the God King when he says, build my temple?
Yeah. After he ends up passing away, you have Jayavarman III, who takes over. He reigns for 27 years and was succeeded by Indravarman I. So we finally get a first in this tale. Indravarman I builds this first, it's called the Great Baray. And it's this giant reservoir.
Raspberry Baray.
It's by way of these irrigation networks that connected it to this Tonlé Sap Lake. And when we're talking about these barays, this is going to be something where I got to put mental pins in to show these pictures, because I think you and I were both kind of taken aback by the size of these baray reservoirs that we're going to be talking about.
Yeah. Okay, here's what's tricky about this episode is there's going to be so much stop and start from a chronological standpoint. And I don't know exactly when they built these things as far as like the barays and everything, but to get a sense of how this empire was so successful, we're just going to knock it out right now. So with the river that runs through the Tonlé Sap Lake, the reason that he put that close is because of in the wet season, when the monsoons would come and flood the river and everything like that, the way that the region is set up, this is so weird to say, there's like a backflow. So it's very flat to where the grade of the water, gravity pulling it down, is not steep. It's not like a mountain stream. It's not like that where it goes down at a severe angle. It's so, what am I trying to say, subtle, that when monsoon season happens, you get the Tonle River, which is a branch off of and flows into the Mekong, correct?
The way that I understood it and kind of looked at it from the pictures is the Mekong runs down. The Tonlé Sap River is a tributary into the Mekong, but it's being fed from the Tonlé Sap Lake.
Correct.
During the dry season.
Correct. So usually water flows into a larger river, which in turn makes it larger. That's the whole point. So with this, the water during the monsoon season, because it floods the Mekong so much, it actually backflows back up the Tonlé Sap and floods Tonlé Sap Lake. And it's 10 times its size. So it goes from basically the lake being an average of like 1 meter deep to 10 meters deep. So from 3 feet to 30 feet deep during 9 months of the 8 or 9 months of the year.
The dry season, they said, runs 8 or 9 months of the year. So for 8 or 9 months of the year, as Chris was talking about, the depth of the lake is only about 1 meter. A 3-foot deep lake seems like a real waste.
Yeah. And it's still pretty spread out because, again, the land is very flat in this section. The way it's laid out is like a very, very shallow bowl.
Yeah, you have 3 feet of water that covers 1,000 square miles.
It's a sheet of glass or a mirror.
Very much so. During this wet season, as the river changes flow, that's nuts to me. I'm having a tough time with it.
You want to hear what's crazier? Remember when we learned about them timing this to where they'd be like, hey, remember when the river changes its flow and we can start sending supplies much easier, barely rowing upriver? And so there's entire seasons where they will do these like merchant shipments going up the river because they're so much easier to get up there.
So soon as the monsoon season, soon as the wet season hits, you're going to have 3 months where the lake swells to a total depth of 10 meters or 33 feet deep, and it covers 6,700 square miles.
6,700 square miles.
It's an inland sea.
Some people that live around the Great Lakes and large bodies of water, there is something very strange for us inlanders. There is something very strange about looking out in the distance and not seeing land.
Yeah.
It is unsettling to me in a way that I really can't describe. So when I'm told that this is a lake, but I can't see anything on the other side of it, I can't see anything past the curvature or whatever it is of the earth because this thing is so huge, that's an ocean at that point. But what this does is this, and these are freshwater like fish. Basically, there's like breeding season happens in all of this, and there's just an abundance of food because of this 3 months of the year when this thing expands so rapidly. But it also requires all of these houses to be built on like 20-foot, 30-foot stilts that they're constructing to make sure that, during those 3 months of the year, they're not completely flooded out.
Mekong River is the second most biodiverse river in the world after the Amazon. So when the wet season happens and that flow changes, that means that all of that biodiversity is flowing right into that lake. Mm-hmm. And I have to imagine, just thinking about this, the best fishing season, obviously it's going to be when the lake is more full, but is there a time when it starts to lower a little bit to where it's a lot easier, like the fish get more concentrated, or are they flowing out with the river?
Yeah, I think that definitely makes sense because at a point it's going to start flowing back out and the water is going to start receding. At a certain point, depending on where fish are at in the lake, there's going to be a pull or as the water starts going down, maybe a natural like drive to return to the main water. But there are going to be a lot that have spread themselves out over this fucking 6,700 square mile lake that are going to be in like patches that are going to get shallower and everything. So that's probably also, again, buddy, it's all, self-regenerating stuff.
Yeah.
So as you're just getting tons and tons of this fish, which you're smoking and preserving and doing everything you can during these seasons, they've got more than enough. And these people are going to become, every civilization that's been successful that we've talked about has usually one common factor. It's a control of water, because that is the most necessary resource to have for the success of a civilization. For an agrarian, like to, be able to grow food or do anything like that, you have to have some way of irrigation. You have to have a control out of that. The way that they design the entirety of their civilization around the concept of like water control is what made them so successful, but it was like a glass cannon. If something wrong happened, and it didn't for a while, shit was going to go south quickly.
Oh, if you have 9 months of dry season, you have to figure out a way to save water for that. And that's where these barays come in, because this first baray that gets built by Indra Varman the First, it's pulling water out of this Tonlé Sap lake when it's full. It's flowing into a reservoir that's 2.4 miles long by 2,600 feet wide. This thing's almost a half mile wide, and it's 2.4 miles long. And at this point in time, this was the largest reservoir, man-made reservoir that there ever was previously leading up to this. Now, it's dried up now.
This is the smaller one,
yes,
correct?
This is the smaller one. The way that they built this, and again, this is just brilliance at work. Because if you're going to dig out a giant pit that's 2.4 miles long by 2,600 feet wide, that's going to take forever, right?
There's not a way that I think you could do it just strictly for eventually, you've got a lot of laborers, but you're digging out jungle.
Yeah.
This is fucking jungle, which means that you're digging through all those roots, you're removing all of that stuff. Or why don't we do this? Instead of digging a reservoir, because then what are we going to do with the water? The lowest point of the water is going to be inaccessible to us from an irrigation perspective, because there's going to be no way to get it and pump it out. Why don't we actually build berms all the way around this thing and make these giant rectangular reservoirs of berms that are going to be 30 to 40 feet high? And when you start building the big ones, are going to be twice to 3 times the size of this, 5 times the size of Central Park. And then design also a gate system in these, in which, because once they build the berms, which the amount of dirt that it would take to build those to the point where they'd be thick enough at the bottom and then still tall enough at the top to be able to support the weight and the erosion of holding that many cubic feet of water.
7.5 million cubic meters were held in this one.
And this is a small boy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they designed gates that a lot of what am I trying to say? Modern irrigation uses.
Yeah.
Some of it is as simple as grooved stones in which you're putting in, slats of either stone or wood or anything like that to control the flow of that to allow water to come out. But the way these guys end up perfecting this system is it's not just like, hey, release the hounds and the water comes out and it floods the fields. They design such a sophisticated series of canals that they're like, okay, release the water at this much. And then once it gets to a gathering point, they have a diversional directional thing that's made of all stone and everything, because erosion, they can't have it being made of dirt because it could wash away. They have these reinforced stone points where they can divert off certain percentages of the water to send them to the western rice paddies, to the eastern rice paddies. And because of that, instead of these areas that if they were to just be left by themselves with the natural rainfall and everything, they would be able to harvest rice once a year. What the Khmer Empire does is they create the system of reservoirs, the canals, the diversion of water to be able to harvest rice for three rice harvests.
3, sometimes 4.
Three and sometimes 4, which means if your population is dictated and the strength of your populace is dictated by how much you can feed and provide them, not only are you keeping your population healthier, not only do you have more to export to bring more stuff into your country, but now you can support a larger population when it all comes down to it, what's going to win wars in a lot of situations?
Food.
The larger size of the army.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I guess feeding an army.
That's what it boils down to, is when you can feed your army and they can actually march and fight. Yeah, right there.
Well, if you have a population of a size where 2 harvests a year is going to feed that population and keep them fed, and you harvest 3 or 4 a year, that means that you have 2 harvests, 1 or 2 harvests, that then you can export and sell and just become independently wealthy. Mm-hmm. Because we're going to be talking about some of these city population numbers that they have in like Angkor compared to what they would be in London.
Yeah.
And the numbers are just astounding. It's incredible how much bigger this empire was. Part of the reason why it can get so big is because it has multiple harvests a year of rice. Mm-hmm. That's the core of their diet, that's going to be able to hold anybody to a good standard of living.
So you get and again, like when you think about how a populace survives and is healthy and develops, you have to have both you got the rice and everything like that, mm-hmm. but now you have all the fish that you're able to get out of the Tonlé Sap. So a healthier population that has more diverse diets and everything like that is always a more successful population.
Yeah. We'll fast forward to 889 with Yasovarman I. He takes control of the empire. He establishes a new capital of Yasodhapura, or Angkor. Angkor would be the capital city of the empire for most of the next, approximately 600 years. There will be a deviation that comes up pretty quick, but they come back to Angkor because it's incredible. So it becomes the largest pre-industrial city in the world. The urban sprawl of the city covered 390 square miles, 1,000 square kilometers, which is larger in footprint than New York City. 300 square miles. So you have 90 more square miles. I don't remember New York City. I think I'm going to get this way wrong. It's between 24 and 27 million people in New York City, mm-hmm. I believe. You have a larger urban sprawl and less of a population, so the city is going to look very different. And I want to explain kind of some of the cooler parts of Angkor when we start talking about Angkor Wat, as far as the fanciness in the city and what all they had.
Yeah, and Angkor is kind of used in a weird way in which it can refer to the region, it can refer to
the people, the empire,
just the main city, and then Angkor Wat is actually more of the temple itself
inside the city.
Exactly. So have we got to where he actually, what was the name of the city that he established in Dravarman? Oh, sorry, we're on Yasovarman.
Yeah. So he establishes the capital city of Yasodhapura,
that's right.
Which becomes Angkor.
That's right.
It's such a big urban sprawl. Nowadays, when you think about within a big city like New York, real estate is always going to come at a premium because buildings are so close.
Yeah.
The sprawl of this with the population becomes something completely different because it is a massive city, but you also have these massive squares of land inside of the city mm-hmm. that are being used for agricultural purposes.
Yeah, everything is used. Each family, I think, had a pool or a pond, in their backyard, that they used for irrigation for their food.
The rice paddies.
They used for bathing and everything like that. So, everyone had their own little area within the city, and you can't build up.
No.
That's the other thing, too. But it's still crazy that this city is just growing like this. And he also, I think this is the guy that begins construction on another baray to the east of the city that's going to be twice the size of the previous ones. Because you know what? He looked at the first one and said, you know what? That's the one my old man built or whatever it was. We're going to make ours bigger, and we're going to go ahead and get even, more. We can irrigate more land.
And that's the choice of where the city went is almost directly in between the Kulin Hills. So all of the water that's going to be flowing out of the mountains on that side. And then the Tonlé Sap, very close, that was connected by this thing called the Siem Reap River, that they changed the direction of the river to pour into this East Baray that you're talking about. He also spent the first year of his reign building 100 monasteries throughout the empire. So he is not only taking on these public works projects, but he's also making sure that on the religious side of things, he's building all of these Hindu monasteries to say, we're not just an empire I'm not just a city builder kind of king, God king. I want to emphasize the God in the God king name to show you that I am the holy leader.
You're not building this to me. You're building this to the other gods. Because they had this weird thing where it was stone structures were only for the gods, correct? Which means that the God king could live in them, right? Or was it that the God king and the actual gods had to live in them? So only temples could be stone.
The temples are where you're doing all of your like sacrifices, everything to the gods.
Yes.
And within that you have all of these I forgot the word. Oh, these Brahmin, these Hindu Brahmin that are living there. They're living in the lap of luxury basically because this is where all the money is flowing into these temples. And so they're living in basically palaces.
But they made the rule that no one else could build their homes out of stone, right?
In Angkor, the majority of the houses that were for the peasantry were all made of wood.
Yes, yeah. That's why there's none of those, but they're able to see the sprawl because there are still stone structures in all these little temple and like things spread throughout the entire area. They're just completely covered by jungle right now. But a ton of it, when they've been doing like the LiDAR, like radar detection for the structures, they've been able to piece together the entire layout of it. What did they say? It's larger than the sprawl of... Was it L.A.?
God, if it was, that would be incredible.
I'm gonna look for that because I had that written somewhere.
So the East Baray that we were talking about that he built, this is going to be a little bit bigger than I believe Grandpa's Baray. This thing measures roughly about 4.5 miles long by 1.1 miles wide. This was built around 900 CE, so you're talking about 11 years into Yasovarman's reign. This massive reservoir held between 35 to 50 million cubic meters of water. So we're going from 7.5 million cubic meters in the original Baray to the East Baray that's holding 35 to 50 million cubic meters of water.
Oh, we still got the old one, though, too.
Yeah.
The old one's still in operation.
This is built kind of primarily because within this city of Angkor, you have, just like you were talking about, to divert all this water to all these rice paddies outside of these cities and these agricultural areas. The insane thing about the outside of the city rice paddies that they were building is they had this special strain of rice. This strain of rice, depending on the rise of the water, was able to grow up to 16 feet high. It was known as floating rice because as the water would raise in certain areas, the rice would continue to raise as well. So depending on how deep your rice paddy was, where you were trying to grow it, if you need to flood more water in, that rice is going to be able to grow up outside of the water and not drown. They can grow up to, I believe they said it was 10 centimeters a day. That was how fast it could grow.
I would love to go and visit a rice paddy just to see how all of that works.
I'm not going to piss on your parade, but I got one word that scares the shit out of me, and that's snakes.
Oh, yeah.
Don't like the thought of a snake swimming up on me.
Nope.
So if you can promise me a snakeless rice paddy, I'm in.
Okay, I'll find that for you.
But the reason that the East Baray is so important is because they're building these canal systems within the city of Angkor, all of these diversion dams and these dikes that are flooding these smaller rice paddies.
So it's roughly the same size as the city limits of Los Angeles or modern Berlin.
Angkor?
Yeah, the Angkor urban center, the core urban center, is larger than modern New York City across all 5 boroughs combined. That's fucking nuts. 4 times the size of modern Paris. This is insane. Like you think Cambodia, you're like, the fuck off. This was here.
It's, I mean, it's really hard to understand how big that is in a medieval city.
And here's the thing too, like when you look at the ruins of like Angkor and Angkor Wat, you're seeing them in there this brown, white, stonish color. Like it seems to be speckled and everything. It still looks amazing. Like the structural designs and everything like that are incredible. It just has that ruin look. But back when these things were new, you got to like paint them in colors and imagine them smooth and not being able to see the cracks and all that. Just like when you picture like Giza and the pyramids of having almost that white limestone smooth sides with a golden cap and everything. Yeah, when you see it in that sense, it's like it's so incredible looking now. You almost don't even need that.
The patina on it now is just as magnificent.
And the tree, fuck, why am I obsessed with the tree? It's the coolest looking thing, right?
Banyan trees are pretty insane. They're kind of like a parasite, whereas their seeds can attach to other trees and they can basically like use that as the donor to where they'll grow all the way around a living tree. Yeah, and then they'll strangle it, and there will be these big hollow sections where the original like tree that they were living off of is. So there's hollow sections in them, and when these banyan seeds land on rock, they do the exact same thing. They wrap their roots and everything around them. They're also punching all the way through this sandstone.
Yeah, because they'll get small and they'll get into a crack, but then those grow. And then they get hard like fucking cement.
Pretty interesting to see how these banyan trees work.
But they look like it was built into... Like, does that make sense? It looks so crazy.
It's like it almost welds itself into the stone. Yasovarman, just beyond what he did as a builder, god king, his depictions show off this great war leader, this great and powerful leader. All these inscriptions show him leading this army into battle. He was kind of a shitty captain of an army. He did end up coming to power through force after his father had given the order of succession to his brother. So he ended up kind of strong-arming his way into the position of God King, and he disliked his dad so much so that they had the histories, the family histories of the reason that he came into power to favor his mother's side more than his father's side as far as the more legitimate claim. Which again, if you're falsifying something, the legitimate claim thing sounds kind of confusing.
It's especially like good, when you're the only one in control of it.
He made an incursion into Champa and was repulsed pretty quickly. Like, it wasn't good at all.
Rolled up and he's like, "What's up, Champa, baby? What's going on?" And she was like, "Not right now."
There's some...
You ain't got no job.
There's some stories, and I'm sure it comes out of Champa, that they said that he was killed in battle. Interestingly enough, he more likely died of leprosy in 910. He was a leper king, which we've had a couple of those. I think Baldwin that was in Jerusalem was a leper king. There was another one that I can't quite remember. But leprosy was something that it stays dormant in your system for so long, and then it can spring up and like your fingers start falling off.
And when it does, it
nasty.
makes itself known.
His son, Hashavarman I, ends up succeeding him in 910 after he fell apart. And his rule, kind of followed by his younger brother, Yashavarman II, marked this period of instability as they struggled for power, because it was first Harshavarman and then it was Ishavarman that were battling with this uncle that they had. I believe it was on the maternal side, so it was their mother's side.
Yeah, because it didn't always follow like the really strict, what do they call that, primogeniture?
Yeah.
Where it's always giving it to, it's the Prince William, Prince Harry situation. It's always the oldest son. Any prince with royal blood can make a claim. And then in that scenario, when you don't have a clear line and it's not made clear, that's where you get into these situations of civil war, someone storming off and creating a separate capital city or doing something like that. But after Yashavarman ends up dying in 1910, the empire kind of gets into, and I guess that's when you could consider probably it's teenage years at that point, when it's starting to kind of rebel a little bit. And like,
You're around a century.
yeah, and people are starting to kind of like be like, well, I should lead, or so you're going to get some like political discourse and also, some pretty bloody civil wars.
Plus, you have Uncle Jayavarman IV. He's the fourth Jayavarman. He's not the second Ishavarman. He's not the first Harshavarman. He's got a little bit more swagger. So in 1928, he would end up moving the capital temporarily from Angkor. It wouldn't return until 1050 CE under the reign of Suryavarman I. And Suryavarman I is the guy that changes the game as far as we're talking about these barays.
But what does that do, though? It's just like Jayavarman is like, listen, fine, fuck you two kids. I'm out of here. And his rebellion is, I'm not going to fight for Angkor. I'm going to just abandon the capital entirely. I'm going to march all of my followers like 100 kilometers northeast, whatever, into the jungle. And then I'm going to build a rival capital. I'm going to call it Kokare. And is that just something to where you don't have all the infrastructure there? So like, I'm just going to go build my own city and people are going to go live there.
You don't, but also the same thing that got Yashavarman the swag from building Angkor is kind of the same thing that follows Jayavarman when he builds this new capital.
Well, he has apparently he has a shit ton of like personal wealth because he builds this thing. It's called the Prasit Thom, and it's this like 7-tiered pyramid temple. And apparently, I mean, if you look at it in comparison to like Angkor Wat, there's a very distinct Cambodian Khmer Empire like architecture. It's the closed lotus flower. It's a lot of like more.
It has the 5 pillars too, right?
Yeah, but this is more of a stepped 7 like Mayan type thing. So this dude, the uncle, ends up ruling from this place until he dies. And then after that, his successor is coming to the plate. He gets killed, and then they're just like, okay, so are we all clear now? Capital's back in Angkor. There's no second capital.
Yeah, I mean, it takes till 1050, so you're talking 172 years that it's away. That's not right at all. 72 years plus 50 is 122.
We could take a bathroom break and do the math.
It's 122.
Okay.
Yeah, let's take a bathroom break, go.
You've spent years building your business. Late nights, tough calls, real sacrifice. When it's time to sell, you deserve an advisor who understands what that journey actually means, not just what's on the balance sheet. Transworld Business Advisors has helped thousands of owners exit on their own terms with confidential worldwide marketplace exposure to find the right buyer. Visit tworld.com today. Transworld Business Advisors. Good deals, good people.
Well, hello. Listen, while we head to the restroom and get ourselves something to drink, why don't you do something nice for yourselves? Head on over to patreon.com/historicallyhigh and get signed up for a little bonus content. I mean, come on, you deserve it.
If you want to keep up with this, our main source of social media is going to be our Instagram, which is Historically High Pod, POD.
You can also head over to, it's Twitter. It's X. It's Twitter. Come on. At Historically High. And that's high, H-I like high.
If you have any recommendations you want to get to us, just want to reach out and say hello, you can hit us up on our email at historicallyhighpodcast, HIGH podcast @gmail.com.
All right. And with that said, let's get back to the good stuff. All right. So it's 122 years, which, yeah, successor could have been 1 or 2, guys. It's a real, what do you say, real Vatican City, Avignon to back to the...
Yeah, moving to France and going back to the Vatican. The man that moved it back was Suryavarman I, and Suryavarman begins the West Baray Reservoir. It ends up being completed between 1050 and 1066. If they got back there in 1050, even at max, that's 16 years to build this West Baray, and it puts the first two to shame. So the approximate measurements of this West Baray were 4.8 to 5 miles long and 1.3 to 1.4 miles wide.
So this is the one that is 5 times the footprint of Central Park in New York.
It's stupid.
Yeah. So this thing still like will hold a ton of water. Like if you take a look at pictures of it, the scale of it, if you just kind of stare at it, it actually kind of throws you off a little bit. But the amount of work that it would take to build like a 30 to 40 foot berm this far around, thick enough and everything to be able to support this, to bring in all of that earth, just shows you like how big of a population they had and how big of a workforce they had. Because this thing was done, wasn't it done in like 6 years?
Well, that's what I mean. Even if they got the earliest start on it when they got back in 1050, it gets completed between 1050 and 1066, so max it would take is 16 years. It probably didn't take that long with as much slave labor as they had and what we've learned about how they built Angkor.
And I mean, when they're building this and Angkor and everything, I think it was the Mayans that were in Mexico, right?
Aztecs were in Mexico, Mayans were in the Yucatan Peninsula, I believe, and then Inca were Peru.
Okay, so the Aztec city was the one that was turned into Mexico City, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Tenochtitlan.
Yeah. Remember we talked about how it was built on like the floating thing and they had constructed it to where it was almost like waterways between the houses?
Uh-huh.
This was built like that as well, where they're like the paths within the city itself, they doubled as both irrigation for all of these like rice paddies and everything that were surrounding the area, but then also as like a highway to get in and out of these places that people could just take like canoes or put cargo in or take it to the market and things. So like just seeing that visual would be awesome. They said it was this crazy blend of just like living like perfectly within like the nature of what they were doing.
We also never mentioned about the East Baray that there was a temple right smack dab in the middle of it.
Yeah, exactly. An island and a fucking temple built. And it's not like hey, this is, a small little, no. This is a full-on, in the same style as all their other temples, one built smack dab in the middle. And their architecture of these cities is, they have this thing about moats, like around the main section of the city where the temples are built. And the first one, I think, is rectangular, correct? Mm-hmm. And then
They all pretty much are.
one of them is perfectly square. And I think
the temples? I thought you were talking about the barays.
nope, the first city was the one that had the rectangular one. The first city we talked about. Mm-hmm. The second city, that's Angkor, they did a perfectly square one. And so they also had all of that water being fed in there as well from like the canal system.
So this West Baray, I understand that we got the measurement a little bit different than these cubic meters, holds roughly about 14 billion gallons of water. It's so big. So big. You also get King Suryavarman II that begins this temple of Angkor Wat that we've been talking about and been alluding to. This starts right around 1113. It takes roughly 30 years to build using slave labor. And Angkor Wat, the reason it takes 30 years to build is because Angkor Wat is the largest religious monument in the world. Dedicated to the god Vishnu. The site covers 400 acres. Vatican City, 121 acres. It's that much bigger. Just this temple that's in the middle of Angkor. As far as the temple goes, there's 5 central towers. They're set up in like the 5 on the side of a dice, 2 on the outsides, 1 directly in the middle. Would you use a dice
it's
5?
hard. It's hard. Yeah, because you look at it from the front and it looks like I'm trying to think of the. And this is the Wat, or is this?
This is Wat, yeah.
Okay.
These 5 central towers symbolize the peaks of Mount Meru, which is the home of the Hindu gods. So this is the crossover. This is the Mount Meru is the Mount Olympus of the Hindu mythology. It's surrounded by this outer moat that Chris was talking about. This moat measures 620 to 650 feet wide. This is how wide it is. This isn't the distance. This isn't how long it is. This is from outside of the city across the moat to inside of the temple is 650 feet. That's how far away that is. Total perimeter of just the moat itself is 3 miles long. It stretches 4,920 feet east to west and 4,265 feet north to south. It's really hard to visualize it, and that's why pictures are going to be key. The average depth of the moat itself is 13 feet, and this is to symbolize the cosmic oceans of milk that you were talking about earlier in the origin story of man that surrounds Mount Meru. The moat itself is really hard for me to understand just how much digging it would take just to build the moat itself. Like, before we even get into the construction of the temple inside the moat, you build that big of a moat.
You have okay, so we're still at the point in the empire where it's still a god king, right? Mm-hmm. You're never short, people.
No, it's very true.
You're a god, man. Like, if you want a fucking moat, a moat's gonna get done.
Yeah.
Regardless of the cost of the moat's gonna get done.
It's just
because if you ain't happy, you'll cause a drought or you'll do something, and the people don't want to test you because everything you've done or everything that's happened since all of these god kings have really been going through here, technically, even though there's been these little skirmishes or inter-family rivalries and everything, the people have still been doing pretty fucking good.
Yeah.
Because, like, the empire itself is prospering. There's, like, some back and forth infighting, but water's still on. Food's still growing. Like... It's kind
don't
of
have
business.
electricity yet, but everything else is taken care of.
Thank God. Jesus, can you imagine if this empire had mastered hydroelectric power?
Yeah. There is a interesting argument that I was thinking of, just because as you're talking about, like, if you can harness the water, you can control everything. Mm-hmm. Would you rather be in the period of the, like, Roman Empire when they had all of the
aqueducts?
Yeah. And basically, like, cities that had all of the waterworks underneath it and all of the piping and everything like that? Or would you rather live in an empire like the Khmer Empire, where you don't necessarily have, like, water flowing to your house or flowing to baths, but you have canals that are draining water into your cash crop rice paddy?
I mean, technically, some of these people had their houses, like, with the back part of the house facing the canal.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know if you just dumped the piss bucket or anything like that. That seems more natural to me, because it would be a lot harder time for someone to interrupt that water flow, because it's just in with nature. Like, you're diverting it and you're telling you where to go, but technically it's still built within the landscape. The whole thing with the Romans with the aqueducts is, like, some of them were elevated. All you got to do is fucking destroy part of an elevated aqueduct and the water doesn't get to the next portion, then it's fucked.
Well, just as far as in the city, too, it would be more beneficial for me to be able to flood my rice paddy than to go get in a communal bath with a bunch of other...
rice paddies in the city, people are spread the fuck out from you.
Yeah.
In Rome, where everyone's just living amongst everyone else, it's not a large part of the population that's getting that water to be able to bathe and wash themselves and shit. So you're pretty much still just living with... on top of people... I always think about that when I think of, like, a new time frame we're talking about. Like, what would it smell like? This, to me, does not feel like it would smell.
I don't think it smells, and I do think that you're in water so much that I think, even though you don't have soap or anything like that, naturally
water is such it's what am I trying to say? It's
purifier almost.
Not a purifier. When it's a symbiotic relationship that they have with this.
Yeah, very much so.
And so you're in it so much and you have such an abundance of it that, yeah, that's when you can afford to be like, why aren't we a clean culture? Mm-hmm. You talk about, like, London. This place, if you think about it, when Angkor was at its peak, maybe 1 million. Somewhere between 750,000 to 1 million people that live within this large swath of land.
You talk, 10th century, I think, is when they said that it hits its zenith, or maybe it's the 11th century.
At the same point, you have London that's sitting around like 40,000 to 50,000. Paris is sitting around 10,000. And these places just probably, I fear for the smell of these places, you would get there and it wouldn't be the fucking darkened skies. It wouldn't be the people in their weird outfits that would fucking shock you the most. You would take a breath and you'd just be like, the fuck is all of that? And it's just all this shit everywhere.
And here, you really only get close enough to where you can see each other wave, probably, unless you're going to the temple or to the square or anything like that. Yeah. The layout of the towers is, just talking about the precision you were talking about with like rectangular and then perfectly square cities. The layout of the towers is strategically aligned with the cosmos. So during the spring equinox, the sun rises directly over the center tower. So as you're staring at, the sun comes up directly over the tallest tower in the center of the temple. You're pretty in tune with the mathematics and the mapping of the stars and sunrises to be able to look at that and say, okay, during this specific time of year, every single year at this time, the sun will rise directly over the center pillar. You're showing a very intelligent understanding.
Oh, 100%, because you know the equinoxes and equinoxes and everything like that.
So this is something that I found pretty interesting, and kind of the way that as we were talking about the difference between Hinduism and Buddhism. So the temple has these super duper intricate wall carvings. There's over 1,800 unique depictions of these celestial dancers. They just stretch for miles. And these are just the outer walls around Angkor Wat and then the walls inside of the temple. And from every documentary that I watched, the smoothest parts of all of these carvings were the breasts on the women.
This was no joke, this was a boobs out society. So the outfit, male or female, was just usually like the thing around the waist. Like either a sarong?
Yeah, I think so.
Or pant type things, or just probably a wrap, most likely being that they were around water most of the time. But yeah, it was just boobs out at all times. And it's very clearly depicted in all of the artwork that this is how it went down, which I think is a very beautiful way for a society to, to work.
This is very similar to like when you see a statue or something like that and you rub the head for good luck and it's always the shiniest part.
Yeah.
The shiniest parts of every one of these celestial dancer reliefs is always their tits.
Yep.
And it's because now I think they get somewhere around an average of like 2 million visitors a year. So if you have 1,800 of these things out, but you're getting 2 million people a year, that's probably every one of those walking up and copping a feel on the dancers. Those boys are going to get smooth quick. You're going to wear down that sand.
There has to be restoration. That's where all of the restoration money goes.
The budget is just trying to resurface
a bunch of horny fucks. Yeah, not even.
It also depicts these large scenes of these old Hindu epics on the wall. And this is where we're talking about how the history that is the Khmer Empire and their belief system is just laid out for you to be able to see.
So Suyuvarman II is the one that commissions Angkor Wat. Is that correct? So really quick, because a lot of the stories that take place with the founding of the Khmer Empire, and then also more current events that are actually carved into that, is a lot of what Suyuvarman I actually did. So at the turn of the millennium, I think Suyuvarman I came in around, 1002?
Possibly.
So I think he only ruled for like 8 years. So the empire itself was kind of torn apart during this 9-year civil war when two rival kings basically claimed the throne at the same time. So there was this guy, his name was Suyuvarman I, or I don't know what his original name was because these guys take a title. It's not just coincidental that they all have Varman at the end of their name. And brilliant military commander, he ends up kind of systematically just picking off like his rivals. So ensure it's never going to happen again, he forces like thousands of these little provincial officials, people basically working for the government, travel to the royal palace in Angkor, and they have to swear a blood oath of total 100% allegiance, and they have to carve their promise into the stone doorway of the palace. So he can point at any point and say, you did that. So once kind of the internal stability ends up getting restored, they turn their focus outward, see if there's anything going on with expansion of the empire. They had this at that point had established a pretty significant military, both land, but then also transportation of the troops by all of these waterways. They had these, this is where we get to talk about the war elephants again, the heavy cavalry that they had while over in fucking Europe, they're riding horses like a bunch of simps. Here in Cambodia, we're riding war elephants that were armored. They also would have like shit strapped to their tusk where they could charge into enemy lines and just swing and like beat the shit out of people. Can you imagine the fear of just having a fucking elephant charging at you?
My soul leaves my body seeing an elephant charge towards me. If I see a horse charging towards me, there's going to be some element of fear with somebody riding on the back. An elephant, I've already shit my pants, then it's 6 feet in front of me because I'm already running.
You are taller than me, and I still feel like even without anything on its back, a horse running at you would still have your soul leaving your body, just because they are bigger than you think.
And maybe this is just stupid confidence, I feel like I would be it would be easier to dodge a horse running at full speed to where it can't change directions, where I feel like an elephant running at me could kind of stalk me because he's slow enough to where he could move either direction to cut off
I think it's opposite. I think a horse at the last second could spring to one side or the other, kind of like... I think an elephant, yeah, they could, but they could only make little maybe like shifts. I don't want to find out either.
No, I would...
The old elephant or the horse debate.
Yeah, I'd much rather be trampled by a horse than an elephant. Actually, no. I take that back immediately because the elephant would kill me immediately.
Yeah.
The horse is going to do a lot of damage that I'm going to have to either live through or slowly die through. Yeah, horse is going to break a
collarbone, shatter some ribs, leave you just gasping for like not being able to breathe. So death by elephant?
Yeah.
Okay. They also would use these like massive for their time, of course, but like oared, they called them war galleys on the Tonlé Sap. And so, okay, I got to get into the naval aspect of this and nerd out for a little bit here because like weapons and the Navy and everything. So the power on the water allowed them to rule this entire, not only 1,000 square mile lake in the dry season, but also during the wet season, it expanded the reach of the Navy and the importance of the Navy because that's how they would fight. But there were full-on naval battles between them and rival countries on this lake. And so, of course, ocean-going vessels are different than lake-going and river-going vessels. So while some of these countries had also like navies or even shipping that went out into the ocean, these guys had their own version of that.
Dragon boats.
And so the ships, dude, they were like solid wood ships that were carved out of one fucking enormous tree that they had to find in the deep jungle that was long enough and straight enough to make these 30 to 40 rower war galleys where they would so they take the tree and they get it cut, I believe, in half first or something like that. And then they would control burn and carve out the entire inside shape. So literally taking hot coals, softening the wood, burning it, and then putting it out, scraping it out, doing the same thing over and over and over again until they were able to get it into the shape where it was recessed. Then they would take fire underneath it after they got it wet and soaked it to create a whole bunch of steam and use the wood once it was pliable to then use like stretching devices to force it down to shallow the draft of a little bit, but to widen it out to where they could have rowers in there and actually have some room.
Have you ever seen this process?
No.
It's one of the more insane things that I've ever seen.
Out of a single piece of wood, right?
To be able to bend wood that way and make it that pliable that you can bend it and then you can stick rods in the middle to hold it while it dries.
Yeah.
It blows my mind. It mystifies me that a tree that could be standing that tall and be that strong could then be made wet and pliable and then stretched out like a piece of mozzarella.
They said they would carve it like 2 inches thick. And so it's still a 2-inch thick fucking piece of wood. And so that's why on the heads of these things, they would have these ornate carvings of like dragons, like you were saying. And then to make these war galleys, they would just simply plank up the sides to make these things deeper to where guys could stand up and be firing, shots, and archers could be like firing out of them.
Well, it's still shallow enough that you could get your oars over the side and create a rhythm. These things
get up close to the bank. Because remember, even in the time when it was the dry season, 3 meters is all the average. Like, you have to be able to get shallow water to be able to transport troops and everything.
If you fall overboard during the dry season, they probably don't leave you behind. They probably just wait for you to crawl back up into the boat
To see if you could stand first. Yeah. You can't, if that's like an embarrassing, like a badge of shame, is when you fall out and you are like, and then all of a sudden you put your hands down and you just kind of pick yourself up and you can walk and catch up to the boat and you just have to get back in.
If you fall in and you start screaming that you're drowning in the dry season, everyone's like, just stand up.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do.
So the ships would have these like large, heavy oars mounted at the rear. So, when you see sometimes in like movies, sailing movies, they don't have like a wheel for the actual rudder. They're holding the stick at the back and just kind of moving it that way.
Yeah.
That's what these had for steering. But they were obviously very, very nimble. They would have, they were used not just for transport, but then also to transport like all of their heavy equipment across all of the jungle, like bypassing the entirety of the jungle.
Yeah.
That floating fortresses. So like when they would go to war, because the kings and generals would want to be close to it, not in the front lines, they would take some of these, like the war canoes, I guess that's what you could call them, the war galleys, and you would just have a few of those together and have a platform built across them. And then in the middle of the platform would have these covered pavilions, and those would serve as like the flagship. So you basically have like the fucking generals or the king sitting there on a fucking recliner or like his cushy shit, just watching the battle from afar of guys just ramming into each other in these fucking war canoes.
It's so hard for me to visualize this just because of all the actual sea and ocean battles that we've talked about. Because even thinking back to like the Spanish galleons that we were talking about coming up and attacking England, or the Armada.
Yeah.
Those things had drafts in them that were probably 30 feet deep at least. So even inside of a lake, like the ships couldn't be big. They had to be these small dragon boats that were so agile, while at the same time they're conducting, I'm assuming, spears, atlatls, bow and arrows, something like that.
No, I got you. I got you, baby. I got you, baby doctors. I got the weaponry covered here in a second.
It's still it's almost a more violent situation because it's so much more hand-to-hand or kind of similar.
So, I mean, they had iron-tipped arrows, so they would be trying to, like, as the ships would close the distance, because they wanted to get close. It was a boarding action type situation. So as they started to get close, part of that was probably the importance, is you didn't know how shallow it was. So they're like, we can't just capsize these guys. They'll just stand up. We got to board their ship. We got to actually like kill them and everything.
Then they're going to spread out and they're going to be harder to hit.
Exactly. So you would have the archers positioned like at the bow on like elevated platforms, and they would basically just be firing out in front as they're approaching. Once the boats actually collided, soldiers would use spears, swords, grappling hooks to board the other ship, and then basically just be fighting across it. So some of the things they would use, these are, and one of these is actually a completely unique, like Cambodian Khmer Empire type weapon. It was called, I'm going to fucking butcher this. It's called the Phakak. PH little apostrophe KAK. So it's this iconic Khmer weapon. It is I'm trying to think of how to like describe the blade. Almost like a very long rectangular-ish blade with maybe a little bit of a flare at the top, but then attached to a long like wooden or bamboo staff that almost looks like a cane, or what am I trying to say? Like that. So almost like a putter with just a little head at the end, or like what would you call that? Like a field hockey stick?
Yeah, it's almost like a wheat thresher.
Yeah, but it's weird because at the top of the hook, that's where you would mount the blade on this. But the reason they did that is it had kind of like a hook on it. So it doubled not only as like an agricultural tool, but then they would use it in battle, because if you're in those boats and you reach over with that blade, part of it could hook the ship and you could drag it in. And it had reach to it, so you could be swinging it from a distance. They would even actually use it like on elephant back. because it would reach that far down. They could just swing it down and hit stuff on the ground.
It is kind of like tying a knife to the end of a shillelagh.
Kinda, yeah. Like put a big knife. Like this is a knife.
A legitimate knife.
It's literally like a 16-inch to 2-foot blade, it looks like. They had another thing called the dab, which the dab was the single-edged sword that resembled like a long saber.
So dangerous.
Yeah.
Dabs are dangerous.
And then some of them had like extended handles that could measure up to like 5. So basically you would have like sometimes a 5-foot-long stick with then a sword on the top of it just to have this huge like reach weapon. You can tell a lot of this is like naval oriented too, because you're not always right next. You're slashing as you're trying to pull the other boat in. They had spears and javelins. That was kind of the primary shock weapon for the infantry. And then bows and arrows, of course. That was kind of a core component of, especially on top of the platforms on the war elephants, was just platforms for archers. They had fucking ballista.
What's that?
Ballista is basically the large crossbow things, like like stationary or mounted, like artillery, like old school crossbow artillery, like a big ass crossbow. And they put them on the backs of elephants sometimes.
A crossbow wielding elephant.
Well, and they think where they got that is they would utilize them, and they most likely the technology wasn't theirs alone, but it was either adopted from Cham mercenaries that they had kind of done dealings with and everything, who had pretty much adapted it from seeing shit where else, of course, in fucking China.
The flow of ideas goes south.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, it's cold up north.
Yeah.
They move much slower up north. Standard, like, peasant soldiers, kind of the bulk of the forces, wore pretty much just whatever it was, like a tunic or even fighting, like, bare-chested.
You mean not a suit of armor?
No. That was actually reserved for, like, higher-ranking officers, and kings would wear, like, the ornamental, like, metal breastplate or hardened, like, boiled leather and stuff that had been basically, like, then reinforced to protect against, like, arrows or slashes.
Nothing that resembled the tin cans of Europe.
I think sometimes this is, like we talked about the time frame, we are in the Common Era. We're at 1,000 right now. Mm-hmm. We want to say this is 1,026 years ago. Rome is when? We're talking Rome is in the is before Common Era, which means, right?
Yeah, I think the Byzantine Empire was still going as they were fighting with the Arab Empire in Constantinople.
So I kind of think about it in the sense of, like, culture would have gone across and they would have seen, especially like God Kings, they're getting all of these people coming in, seeing their empire. Tell me stories about these lands you've seen. It's a Marco Polo situation. The only reason we can't confirm that is because they wrote it down on shit that's no longer around. And they used all the room that they had on their walls for their history, rightfully so. But I definitely see stories from, like, Greek and Roman sources and everything coming through about those decorative fucking breastplates with, like, the fucking abs and shit like that. I definitely see that being the type of stuff, but, like, made of gold and ornamental and stuff of these generals.
More form-fitting, or at least the form they want to portray.
Yeah, exactly.
Just to point out what's going on.
I could be completely fucking wrong on that, but I just see that as being, like, yeah, that kind of seems to be the pinnacle of, like, what ornamental armor is like.
And when you're talking about these carvings and reliefs, that's how they're portrayed. Mm-hmm. So whether or not it was exactly like that, they were fantastical in these carvings.
They were trying to be anatomically, like, appealing.
So just to flash over, 11th century, 1096 to 1099 is when we get the First Crusade. So that's what's going on over in Europe. We're doing the First Crusade over in Europe during 1096 to 1099.
And these people got elephants carrying commanders and kings that are issuing flag signals and trumpet commands and all this kind of stuff to their soldiers fighting on giant lakes.
Yeah. And those are the stories that you're seeing play out on these carvings on Angkor Wat. You're seeing a history that's fairly recent, but it's also being blended in with all of these old Hindu stories, therefore strengthening this religious feel of these kings that they're having. But just to get back to a little bit of the geography of Angkor Wat, the height of this central tower raises 213 feet in the air, so 65 meters into the air, which means that they had to get up at least 210 meters in the air or 210 feet in the air to cap this thing off with this giant lotus.
Yeah. So when you look at it, does it remind you kind of like a pine cone?
A little bit, yeah.
So, and what I mean by that is, if you're looking at it and it looks like a lotus bud, it also looks like it has the little things that are kind of sticking back up, like thorns almost.
Either that or maybe that's the opening of the petals.
That's what I'm trying to figure out, because it's very jagged. Like, and of course they try to do reconstructions of what it looked like. But the reason that stands out to me is those are so intricate. Like, there's so many of them. It's not just like, I'm not trying to poo-poo on like other structures and all this kind of stuff, but if you look at something like the Romans did in just terms of like, let's say like the outside of the Pantheon or something like that. Beautiful columns, beautiful Roman architecture, all that stuff. It's fantastic. They stole it from the Greeks. When you look at something like this, it is so elaborate because there are faces carved into the stones, and there are like the gates that Angkor had, I think. The city had 5 gates, one on each side, and then a victory gate that went into the royal palace. And above each gate was these intricately carved huge towers that have a face carved on every single side. And then at Angkor Wat, it's a lot of this same stuff where you can actually see the stone faces. Of course, now it looks like you can see the separation of the blocks and everything, but just being like, this was so perfectly placed and then smoothed over to where this didn't even look like stone. Like, this was painted and colored and kept up to like date, and or could have been gold leafed or something.
So happy that you're bringing this up, because you were talking about not to shit on other things. We're about to.
Okay.
So just for the Angkor Wat temple itself, just for this Angkor Wat complex that's within Angkor, they estimate that they used 5 to 10 million heavy sandstone blocks for construction. And there was no mortar between these. These were so intricately and precision cut.
So what they would do is you would have the top block and and where it was going to go, whatever block was going to go on top of, or the bottom block, and you would put water between them, and then they would just grind them back and forth, and then put more water and grind them back and forth until they fit so smoothly and so locked together that you couldn't get anything between them.
It's brilliant. It's such a fine strategy.
Okay. This is in a place that gets monsoons, right? Very wet.
Yeah.
Which means that the water table, especially being so close to so many of these rivers and all this kind of stuff, is also going to be kind of probably shift a little bit and everything.
Yeah.
A lot of these structures are kind of falling. There's a restoration efforts trying to get these things rebuilt and get them reinforced. The banyan trees are growing through shit and all that. Not at Angkor Wat, but at like the city of Angkor and the ruins and everything.
It's starting to get swallowed. To get into Angkor Wat, you have to get across a 650-foot moat to get in there.
Yeah. I mean, they knew what they were doing. It was built to last. But these things are built on land that you don't think you would build stuff like this. Yeah. They were so good about, they call it a hydraulic city, which is fucking cool, just the term. And it's because it was designed in which the stone that is like the filler stone that is built behind the bones, I guess, of these places are, I think it was laterite. I think we said, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this like iron rich, it's rich in another metal, but it is like a clay type stuff you can get out of the ground, and then it hardens like fucking iron. It's very porous as well. They knew that monsoon, the water drainage had to be a thing. They knew fucking everything about water. So they designed the interior of this out of this more porous stone that would help with the drainage, and that way you wouldn't get separation inside of an inner wall pushing out on an outer wall or anything.
It's precision plus also just a knowledge of the resources that you have.
But like, think of it in the sense of, you look at the pyramids, and of course the reason that they're so, when you get close to them, that they look the way they do is because they've been picked apart, they've been stolen from over years and years and years.
You also have giant sandstorms that are pelting the...
Correct. But what's even more destructive than that, hundreds, almost 1,000 years of yearly monsoon seasons of just torrential water downpour, and these places haven't eroded.
No, they're certainly not to their former glories, but they were saying that a lot of these carvings on like the exterior walls that would be more prone to getting hit are still like, they originally believed that they were about 10 centimeters deep that they would go in. And some of these reliefs are only down to like 8 centimeters. So over 1,000 years, you've seen only 2 centimeters of...
They're reading
erosion.
Sanskrit off the outside walls of these. Yeah.
And just to point out the comparisons between the pyramids, that 5 to 10 million sandstone blocks that we were talking about that they used in Angkor Wat alone is more than the total stone that was used in all the Egyptian pyramids combined. Now, there are some caveats to that because Angkor Wat they were mining these blocks at Mount Kulin that was about 25 miles away. They were transported through the canals on the rafts. The reason they were able to do it is because a lot of these stones that were used weigh about 440 to 6,600 pounds, or 660 pounds, as compared to the tonnage that was being taken out of the massive blocks that were being used on the Egyptian pyramids. Like, it's the reason that they use so many more is just because they were so much smaller, which also goes to so some of the stuff that was used in the Egyptian temples could weigh up to 4 tons. So 8,000 pounds compared to 660 max that they're moving down the river.
They knew what they were doing.
They knew what they were doing.
It's still fucking loud. It's still there in the middle of a jungle.
Well, at the same time, it calls into question so much more the ability to float that stuff down the Nile. Because it was just that much bigger. You have such an intricate design to build these. And granted, everything that goes on inside the pyramids, super cool, super elaborate, all of the chambers and the tombs and everything like that. You have a lot of these intricate rooms inside of Angkor Wat, while at the same time you have all of the adornments on the outside, all of the carvings to create these lotus tops in these towers. You're very hard pressed to find stone in Angkor Wat that is not carved. Like, that would be a hunt. You'd have to be like, hey, this doesn't look carved. And they're like, actually, it's carved to not look carved. You're like, fuck. It doesn't look carved, but there is a pattern on it.
I mean, but the story, like you said, it's meant to go ahead and be, the manifestation of that, like the Hindu cosmology on Earth, and it's a long tale.
Maybe the most interesting thing about Angkor Wat is a majority of these other temples face west. Everything face west. Or everything face east. Angkor Wat faces west in the direction of Shiva the Destroyer. So because it's facing west instead of east like everything else, I imagine that probably has something to do with the rising sun in the east and the setting in the west. The destruction would have to be facing towards the west. But it becomes a funerary temple for Suryavarman II, which he dies before the end of the construction. And I don't know, I didn't get deep enough into how they treat a body after it dies, but his remains were then moved into Angkor Wat's funerary tomb. Like, I want to say it was like 25 years after he died. So probably pretty gross to move that unless he's just in the sandstone box that you can just transport.
You want to hope so.
You don't want to crack the seal on that thing.
No, you do not.
Probably not.
Didn't we talk about that when it was Genghis, right?
Yeah. He got bloated and stinky as they were moving him
He was
back.
way down in China when he died, right? Yeah.
So, as we're talking about just how big Angkor was, this was the number. So in the 13th century was the peak population of Angkor. So 1,200 to 1,300, between 700,000 to 1 million people. In that same time period in London, about 20,000 people.
Yeah. At one point during its time, it was the largest city on Earth, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Largest pre-industrial city on Earth.
Yep.
All because you were able to manipulate water and grow rice at a rate to where you could have a city of 1 million people and be able to support them all.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of supporting themselves with all of these rice paddies inside of Angkor. incredible. The city relied, as we were talking about earlier, on this massive network of canals and dikes and barays from the outside. And as Chris was saying, 3 to 4 harvests a year of rice that you're getting. So you're getting 4 times the amount of harvest, 4 times the amount of rice that somewhere else that would have an equal size agrarian area, but doesn't have control of the water system to be able to do this.
They're having to do
times.
it the old-fashioned way, where it's just at the whims of Mother Nature,
and
Brother Nature.
Housing outside of the top caste system that were living in these temples and within some of these giant mega structures, it was all wood. And that becomes a problem because when Angkor starts to get pointed at from some of these other rising empires, the raids that would come into town, the easiest thing to tear apart and burn down were all the wood structures of the peasants that were working in the city.
Well, they're also the furthest out.
Yeah. Angkor Wat is located southeast, like in Angkor proper. So we're going to talk about another city that comes in that's pretty impressive too, but you're going to see what a purpose-built city is, as opposed to Angkor Wat being built after Angkor was already kind of established.
Yeah.
There's a king named Dahavarin Devarman the second, who dies right around 1860. The heir, Jayavarman VII, was usurped by his brother Yasovarman II. And Jaya, he was something called where is it? What kind of Buddhist was he? We'll get to it when we get to it. He was a Buddhist. Buddhist, being a peaceful guy, allows his brother Yasovarman II to take the throne. Jaya goes ahead and exiles himself to Champa, which is a competing empire.
Like to the east, yeah.
With Yaso in power, there was a court official whose name I'm not going to try. We're just going to call him a court official because there's more letters in this than it feels like there is in the alphabet. Kind of leads a violent coup. And during this violent coup, Jayavarman VII returns to Angkor to support his brother. So he's supporting his brother.
Well, he's on his way.
Yeah.
To support his brother.
A man who took the God King role away from Jayavarman VII is going to support his brother as he's being usurped for the throne.
He's a chill guy, man.
He is. He's
just
very,
a chill guy.
very chill. Yaso would end up being killed. The court would be taken over by the court official. He returns to Champa, and as he's in Champa, there is a Champ invasion that gets launched on Angkor.
I just see him like riding back on his horse, and he's like, "We're almost there. We're almost inside of the city." And a messenger rides up, and he's like, "Oh, you're here to greet us?" He's like, "Your brother is dead." The other guy's taking the throne. He's just like, "All right, everybody, turn it around."
And then as he's going back, he sees all this Cham army that's flowing out of Champa headed back towards there.
Yeah.
And Champa shows up. They do what we're going to see kind of becomes more commonplace, and they end up killing the court official and sacking the city. They burn Angkor down. They raze the whole entire thing. So Jayavarman returns to Angkor to take the throne after the Champa razed the city. They looted everything. Now, as King Jayavarman VII, he raises an army, which is kind of an interesting thought because a Buddhist, Mahayana Buddhist, that was what I was looking for earlier, somebody that was very nonviolent, that wouldn't fight his brother for the crown, that didn't make it back in time to support the bloody coup that his brother went through, wasn't going to fight that guy.
Against the coup. Okay, so you got Jayavarman VII. I'm just going to call him 7. You got 7. His older brother, he's in line. He's picked. It's his older brother that takes it from him, right?
Yes.
Because he was selected by his father as the younger brother, and his father's like, "I want your younger brother to rule." Older brother still comes in. He's like, I guess he called shotgun. I'm going to back out to Champa. All of a sudden, there's a coup, and it's an inside job. He's like, I got to go support my brother, even though he's a D-bag, because it's the right thing to do. On his way there, the guy that's throwing the coup ends up pulling it off and becoming the leader. He goes back to Champa.
He doesn't attack the guy
No.
just took
Of
his
course,
rightful
he's a
throne.
pacifist. So he goes back. Champa's then like, there's instability going on over here. This is the perfect time to attack. And it's not like when Jayavarman the Seventh is going back to Champa, he's going and being like at the royal court in Champa. He's just in Champa. That's where he's at. So as they then come in, they overthrow. They end up killing the public official, the court official, and they just leave it leaderless and just kind of in ruin. Then Jayavarman comes back and he's like, no one else is here to go ahead and do it. I'm going to step in. He starts piecing everything back together. And during this time when he's trying to piece everything back together, he's like, my people have been real fucked up. And he's looking around and he's looking at all the death and all the destruction. And that part of him, that's the pacifist and everything, that just kind of like, that does the Homer Simpson, and it just steps itself right back into the bush. And he's like, okay, but if we're going to do this, we're going to do it the smart way. So instead of launching this hasty, trying to counter and pretty much just try to slap fight with the Champa, he's like, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and just kind of pull back. We're going to stay quiet. We're going to start building up our forces.
What is that to go from being a pacifist to like a finely skilled military commander? What does that say? The fact that this guy was raised as a non-violent person, but then when he's forced into a violent position to lead people, he does very, very well. Is that just pent up anger? For the same
reason that I don't feel, I'm not a violent person. I don't believe in violence. But if you set me in front of a fucking D&D map and you say you need to kill this group of enemy soldiers, I'm going to devise a very good plan to try to kill all of them. I think it's just like you have a survival instinct. I think the whole humanity aspect of it is that you don't have to give in to those base instincts that you really don't need anymore, but that are just left over from residual the time we had to actually survive by killing other people.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's it, is you spent so much time thinking about what you could do while never acting on it that once it comes time to act on it, you're ready.
Also, think if you're bored and you just like to read a lot, how much like literature out there is actually like non-war adjacent where you're not reading about somebody's military successes. He ends up spending months unifying all of these fractured Khmer factions, the regional governors, who are pretty much like being, because they're being occupied by the Cham. The Champa. He's like, okay, listen, I got a plan. Let's take our time. Let's build up a plan to get these guys out of here. So as he kind of organizes more of a disciplined actual army instead of just like a small resistance, he starts basically just running a guerrilla campaign and ambushing all these Champa supply lines and just kind of not trying to make one giant thrust to like force them out or to chop the head off the snake. He's going to try to death by paper cut them.
He's playing with them. Almost.
This is his land.
He's cutting supply lines that are actively feeding this Cham army that's inside of his own border.
And it's weakening their hold on it. And all of a sudden, once he's ready, the turning point of this war becomes this huge, bloody naval battle that's fought on Tonlé Sap Lake. It's connecting rivers. It's got us just span an insane like amount of ground, right?
Yeah, it was either a massive war during the rainy season or it was a very tight war.
Well, the other thing too is he kind of learned from what had worked before, because he's looking at it, he's like, how did Champa like get Angkor before? They're like, they came in with like a shit ton of ships we weren't expecting. And he's like, so we just do that, right? And they're like, you think that'll work? He's like, if it worked once, it could work again. They're not expecting us to come in force. They don't even really know we're like gearing up for this thing. So you have all these Khmer ships that are packed with archers and soldiers. They're armed with all these weapons that we talked about. They're ramming all these Cham vessels. This is all immortalized on the carving of the Bayon temple, which is in the center, I believe, of the city, correct? That we're going to talk about. Mm-hmm. That's okay.
Do you think that there was a period of time where he took like 2 weeks and just walked around Angkor Wat and was looking around, seeing all of these carvings of all of these old lake naval battles?
Yeah.
It's just like, Like that.
You know what this could use? I'll make sure I add this on mine. I want us to be like tossing these fuckers to crocodiles and shit.
After this naval battle, he's pushed the Cham basically back into their borders. And after he does that, he goes ahead and marches to the capital of Champa in 1190. And this Mahayana Buddhist goes ahead and absolutely fucks up the city. I mean, they don't necessarily raise the city, but they take the capital. They also capture the king, and then they strap chains on the king and they march his ass all the way back to Angkor while they finish up mopping up in Champa. So by 1203, Champa is entirely subdued and becomes a vassal state of the Khmer. I believe there's another decade after that where they're occupying Champa before they finally are pulling themselves back.
Yeah, because while Seven's busy doing all this, so he ends up beating them in the naval battle, cuts them off, weakens their forces even more so. Then he himself goes to Angkor to actually liberate it, to make sure that it's taken. They have to fight street by street. After getting the Cham governors out of there, killing them, and getting rid of them, he officially ascends to the throne. I think it's in 1181. He's 60, kind of around 60 at this point. And this is what you're talking about. He's like, I got to make sure at this point I'm 60. Depending on who the next leader is, shit goes south. They try to invade. I need to make sure while I'm still able to oversee this that they're not a problem anymore. And then that's when, while he's actually like rebuilding and fortifying Angkor with like new walls, he's like, they're not going to fucking sneak up on us again. We're going to build new walls. That's when he basically takes his army while all these civil projects are going on. I say projects when I basically mean, again, forced labor.
Yeah.
He goes into Champa, and it was what called... It's not Vijaya, is it? Vijaya? It's Vijaya, right?
Depends on which way you're looking at it. If she's laying on her side, it's Vijaya, and if she's laying on her back or her front, it's Vijaya.
But yeah, that's where he basically is just like, you're now you're now a part of the Khmer Empire.
The fact that Jayavarman VII takes power at age 60, he rules for over 3 decades. And I don't want to poke any holes in this mythology because age is such a... I mean, it's the way that they were doing things before the Common Era was just kind of by like the reign and how many years as far as how they would count stuff. We're in the Common Era at this point. 90 back then feels pretty old. And maybe that's his relaxed Buddha nature. Maybe that's what it is that's keeping him young. But 3 decades of rule back then is huge. 3 decades of rule by a guy that takes over when he's 60?
Yeah.
That's really hard to comprehend how healthy this guy must have been.
He starts cramming in a ton of stuff because he knows he's not long for this world. So he ends up reestablishing the empire. Becomes from an exiled prince to this legendary god king. Again, absolute authority. So he's like, I'm going to go ahead and build what will be known as the Great City. It's going to be called Angkor Thom, Thom. And it's going to be this massive fortified city. We're going to make sure that our capital never falls again. And it's going to have, of course, the classic moat. It's going to have a moat, but it's got to be bigger. This one has to be completely squared, perfectly squared. So this is established kind of in the late 12th century. It was supposed to be a fortress city, spans 3.5 square miles, and housed an estimated like 100,000 people within the walls, but then is, again, surrounded by an urban just sprawl that spreads out from it of like different neighborhoods, wooden structures, things like that, of like nearly 1 million people.
And part of the reason that he does this is because during his reign, right at the beginning of his reign, after he settles everything down, he institutes Mahayana Buddhism as the de facto state religion. So we're moving away from Hinduism, and he didn't know it at the time, but this kind of new separation between like there's kings and there's gods. I'm not a king god anymore. I'm the ruler of all I survey, but as far as anything up above me, those guys take care of that. It's going to destabilize the empire for future generations. And as
you go from a society of the guy that's been telling us to do all this kind of stuff, we've been under the impression that the entirety of our afterlife is completely dependent on this guy being happy that we were doing stuff. We can't overthrow this guy because he's also got probably terrifying powers because he's got God in his name. Now he's telling us he's just a king. I mean, we hear stories all the time about bad things happening to kings, right? Kings get overthrown, kings get replaced. And when you do that and you lose that incentive of this guy does not control everything, not the weather, not the hard, like all of this is just, technically it's science that's been able to develop all this shit technically. But yeah, that's going to be a pretty big culture shock. I know it sounds weird to kind of bypass it, but you are literally like, in these people's eyes, what does that even look like when you're just like, so you're not God? Like,
for me, this is and I heard it, so I can't claim it as my own, but it made so much sense. This is a 1-to-1 comparison to Christianity and the Roman Empire. This is in the early stages of the Roman Empire after Jesus goes up on the cross. Christianity is kind of like a taboo religion that's only practiced in the shadows because you have the rulers who look down on Christianity and are just attacking it all the time. And then you have a Christian Roman ruler ascend to the throne and Christianity starts taking over because, as we were talking about, most of the Hindu people were the statesmen of the upper caste, whereas you had most of the peasantry who was Buddhist. So now you have a king who's coming to power who's Buddhist, and he's saying, hey, we're changing the de facto religion over to Buddhism.
But he doesn't realize what he's doing.
He doesn't realize it, while at the same time he's emboldening the peasantry because now the whole caste system that was Hindu and looked down upon them for being Buddhists, now they're in the minority. They were in the minority before, but when the God King is Hindu, they're the majority just because
and in that situation, they're then protected de facto under the umbrella of the God King sharing his same religion.
Yep. So it's a complete shift.
This must be why he builds the city in this manner, because he builds a massive 100-meter wide, so 330-foot wide moat that encircles the city. So the city in itself, when I say city, this is where, like Adam was just talking about, this is where that class of people are living, more of the well-to-dos. Outside of this city and on the other side of the moat is where most of the population is actually living. So this thing is completely encircling the city, and it runs, I want to say, right on the inside of it, there's a 26-foot tall, 3-kilometer wide, sorry, not 3-kilometer wide, 26-foot tall, 3-kilometer long on each side wall that's right there as soon as you get past the moat. That's reinforced by like a rampart on the other side, so soldiers can just run up the wall and fire down whatever is coming across. The only place you can come across was these 5 grand stone gates, north, south, east, and west. We talked about them earlier. The Victory Gate that led to the Royal Palace, so that's an interior gate. The north, south, east, and west, of course, this city lines up perfectly to its direction. It's been planned like that. And that's where you get the 4 massive carved stone faces looking out toward the 4 cardinal directions. Leading up to each gate is a causeway over the moat that's lined with 108 stone statues. Each gate. One side stands the 54 divas or devas, the gods, and on the other, the 54 asuras or the demons. And they're all gripping like the Naga serpent because that's part of the mythology. So I'm just trying to kind of like the amount of time and the elaboracy of this. That's just the causeways to get into the city.
You're not going to talk about the Terrace of the Elephants?
No, that's I'm not that far down here, man. I haven't got to the Bayon yet.
Yeah, so just within Angkor Thom, it covers 2,225 acres. It's massive. As Chris was talking about, 8-meter high walls on the inside of the moat. It's going to be a pretty protected city. It's a protected city that's right next to Angkor that just got run through by the Cham. So not only is he taking part in this building project for Angkor Thom, his own town, he's also rebuilding Angkor himself.
Yes, yeah.
So he has slave labor that's working to rebuild and restore Angkor while he's building this Buddhist Angkor Thom right behind it, and also surrounding it with a massive wall and a massive moat. So instead of just the temple, Angkor Wat, being surrounded by the moat and the wall, now we've done it to the whole city because they realized that the Cham people didn't mess up Angkor Wat when they showed up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, if we just
What's
build
the commonality here? A moat.
Yeah.
A moat must have been at least some determining factor.
if we build the city out of the wall,
Yeah. So the exact geometric center of Angkor Thom sits this thing called the Bayon, and it's his official state temple. So it has these 54 like Gothic looking. That's actually the word Gothic. When it kind of looks like that, like the little spires and everything that kind of stick up, it does have like a little bit of a Gothic feel.
I don't think they call it that, but that's what we slapped on it.
Yeah. It's Khmerian, I guess. But then there's like these 200 massive stone faces that are carved. This is where they think that when he was carving this is where you also get to see the changeover, and you get to see some like Buddhist deities that are being carved into this now as well. So this is almost like, do you feel like he started carving this because the other city was more dedicated to Hinduism and its story and everything like that? And now he's also building this. He's like, I can't just scrape all that shit off the walls or anything like that. It's better. I'm just going to start over again. We'll keep those two. They're really awesome, but we'll start building this one.
I think part of the reason that he did it is because this Mahayana Buddhism is a very flexible religion. So as this Buddhism is spreading, it's not, we're going to talk about another form that it's pretty strict, it's pretty rigid as far as their beliefs go. But this Mahayana Buddhism is a lot of, once we show up to an area, we're not going to change any of the local culture. We're going to ingratiate ourselves by accepting those things into our religion, so we don't feel as, I guess,
we're not lording over them. We're not going to take anything away. We're just going to give them an extra if they want it, and everyone can do their own thing. So one of the things, and this was my next note, so I don't know why I didn't just read it. So the outer walls had like miles of these hyper detailed like carvings. So Angkor Wat basically, like we were talking about, focuses on the mythology. This one actually was the one that had the historical retelling. So this served as like the depictions of events that actually happened. You got like the naval battle against the Cham, because that had just happened, of course. You would get everyday like scenes of soldiers cooking. There's been ones that they've seen that are depicting like cockfights. You would see markets. So it kind of looks like it was also telling about the daily life of the citizens that were actually living there. So it was more of like a historical, I guess, text.
There's also I guess you would call it a juxtaposition with Angkor Wat. Angkor Wat, being a temple, a Hindu temple, was surrounded by a wall, a wall for protection.
That's true. And you're also saying temple. This wasn't a temple. There was a temple in the middle of it, but the walls outside are telling the story of the city.
Well, the Bayon, the Buddhist temple that's inside there, has no walls protecting the temple. So the Hindu people protected their temple from Buddhists that they didn't want coming into their temple. The Buddhists didn't create a security wall because they were fine with everybody going into their temple.
Gotcha.
There's no kind of form of protectionism as far as like, this is just ours.
The construction itself is a message about the religion.
Yeah,
almost.
It's an open religion that's showing them, hey, we accept everybody.
Like you were saying, Terrace of the Elephants, this 350 meter long viewing platform that was decorated like with relief carvings of elephants. This is where basically when they were marching back from war, from conquest, bringing back the spoils, the king would stand here to oversee them returning to the city. What have you brought me?
Well, inside the city, it's used for royal viewings. It's where the king is sitting as they're going through and doing these parades, these public ceremonies. I imagine that it has to be that tall so you don't get like an elephant trunk swing that accidentally knocks you off as the elephants are marching
Oh, I think
through.
it's up pretty high.
That's what I mean. If you were lower, if you were at like eye level with a
Yeah.
12-foot tall elephant, he swings that trunk up, all of a sudden, king's up and over the wall.
Yes.
It's like a baseball bat just smacking a baseball.
We actually lost one of our kings that way.
They also, and this is just how open they were. There was this other thing inside Angkor Thom called the Buffoon. It's this 3-tiered temple mountain that's dedicated to the Hindu god of Shiva. So we're not only building just strictly Buddhist things, we're still building Hindu temples inside of Angkor Thom because we know that not everybody that's coming into the city is going to be Buddhist. We want them to feel free to worship their gods while also knowing that our state religion is just Buddhism.
Well, and what's crazy too is this is kind of a transition as well where behind the terraces, the palace itself is actually built of wood because they made that transition to where only the gods were allowed to live in stone as being something of the change. So while the terrace and all that kind of still exists and everything, and the Bayon does, the palace just rotted away with the rest of all the surrounding area. The only thing that still stands of that, I think, is there was this like stone entry gate and then the royal swimming pool that still remains.
This guy was the builder king. Building Angkor, huge deal. This guy restored Angkor, built Angkor Thom, then went on to build over 100 hospitals that were distributed uniformly across the empire. They provided free medical care. They were always stocked and staffed by trained attendants.
Trained for the time.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what
we know how to use
like.
leeches.
He also expanded the road system into this just unified network leading to all the cities that had bridges. They had raised causeways. And then along those roads, he built 121 rest houses that were every 9 to 15 miles apart. So just like we were talking about the Roman roads, just like everything that was going on in the West, he's doing over here. These rest houses had fireplaces in them. They were always stocked with provisions. It was a place that you could stop and rest as you're going along.
Khmer Empire using that type of stuff for the postal service to get around.
Hey, there's so many places where this pops up, and I have to wonder that has to be an understanding. Is that something that you just come upon naturally because it's kind of common sense that you would want that for efficiency? Or do you think that was something that they heard from the West?
I don't know. I don't know if you just get to a point when you're doing so well as a civilization that when you're reaching your peak, you're just like, we can just afford to take care of all of these like little things that will make life more convenient and that benefit everyone, which is a weird thing. I also don't know if they're available to everyone. They could have been just for rich people, and they could have been another way to make income for the empire.
It's true.
So I don't know to what degree is it. But when you get to a civilization that's been this successful, it is obviously able to take care of its people. It has to keep them fed because it knows it needs to build all this shit, and they got to have a labor force to do it. It gets to a point when its biggest strength ends up becoming its biggest weakness. So, I mean, unless we have anything before that, you want to talk about how it starts kind of teetering off?
Yeah. A lot of kind of the downswing follows these reigns from 1243 on because there's so much more pressure from the public that we're getting tired of this constant yo-yo of religions from Buddhism to Hinduism, back to King Jayavarman VIII, who reintroduces Hinduism in 1243, like I was saying, and begins converting or just heavily defacing all of these Buddhist temples. He is hardline Hindu. He's going to get rid of all of these beautiful structures, these beautiful ornate structures. And a lot of them, I believe they said around the Bayon and in Angkor Thom was a lot of Jayavarman VII's faces that were carved in there.
Oh, yeah.
So he was going through and desecrating these Buddhist temples with Jayavarman VII's face on as Jayavarman VIII. That was the royal name that you decided to take, knowing that the previous one to you was very hardcore Buddhist. But the switch back to Hinduism shows the more violent side of it. And I didn't look into it. I'm sure that Eastern religions are very similar to Western religions, that there's just different sects of Buddhism, there's different sects of Hinduism.
Okay, so is part of that Jayavarman the Eighth? Is it his son?
I don't think it is, because he comes to power in 1243.
So maybe a nephew. I'm not
a great grandson, maybe grandson.
Yeah. So either way, what he's basically trying to do is he has seen Jayavarman the Seventh still have this thing going on where people aren't viewing him as a god. Do you think the reason he tries to switch this back to Hinduism is he's like, I got to get back in God mode. I got to have them looking back. Like he's seeing some like rumblings. He's got his hand to the pulse. He's like, these people aren't respecting us anymore. He's like, we need to be gods again. And the only way we're able to do that, I can't pull that shit if they're all Buddhists. I got to switch the shit back to Hindu.
I think that there's a lot of that. I also think that once you sort of break the illusion as far as like you not being tied to the afterlife for your subjects.
You're not the gatekeeper.
Yeah. There's less of a, I guess, there's less of a desire to pay your taxes. There's less of a desire for you to go out on these public works projects. And slowly over time, through just less income coming in, more pressing issues, building projects start to slow. And we get kind of the best look as far as a primary source for everyday lives of the residents in 1296. There was a Chinese diplomat named Zhou Daguan that visits Angkor. He writes about the empire, and you can kind of see in late 13th century what's going on inside of Angkor, where it's not necessarily at its peak. We've already seen its peak. We saw it razed to the ground. Then we saw it brought back to life, given this extra growth of Angkor Thom on the side of it. The empire has gone through multiple changes in religion. So really what the writings that we're getting from this Chinese diplomat is kind of like this is where they went. They reached the mountaintop and then somehow were able to fuck that up. They were able to split the populace along religious lines and then tried to reinstate this hardline Hinduism when everybody else already realizes that it's kind of a farce.
So you have the ability as a god king that if you wanted to build we need another baray. Let's go dig another one. It's your religious duty as subjects of the God King to go do that. You shut your mouth, you got there, you make the berms, and it fills with water. If something were to happen as far as like a public works disaster where, oh shit, one of the sides eroded and it's spilling everything and it's destroying everything, as a God King, you say, stop what you're doing. Your God King commands you, go fix it. Everyone goes out there, rushes, it gets done because you have access to that instantaneous command.
Yeah.
When you don't have that anymore, you no longer have that absolute authority to command hundreds of thousands of people to do immediate back-breaking labor that puts themselves in danger. Because these people with a God King are willing to just throw their lives in here. And it's like, do you need us to throw bodies in the hole to block it up while other guys fill it in with dirt? Like, we do that. Now it's to the point where it's just like, yeah, we're going to need to start talking about hazard pay before we start shoveling dirt into this gap. And it's this, as the shift tries to go back to this God King thing, people are like, yeah, but we don't want to throw our bodies in the gap anymore. We don't want to go back to that. So,
and you can't make us, because if we tell you no, we're not condemned to whatever Hindu hell is.
Mm-hmm. So you also get weather. Weather starts working against them because it's not just a case of, oh, it gets dry for a little bit, because we've been prepared for that. If it gets dry, we got all of these reservoirs that we can actually use. But when you get, when there's generational things that happen, like this is a 50-year drought, or you get stuff that happens over the course of thousands of years where you might get a drought that lasts, like 15 years. And no one can prepare for that because that's never happened in the history of anyone's lifetime or anyone's heard about. Well, it happens in a way to where there is like, and Cambodia experiences these crazy like climate whiplash scenarios where you'll have decades of like intense multi-year droughts, sporadic with a little bit of monsoons, but then all of a sudden, when the monsoons return and they return just in crazy amounts because of the drastic swing the other direction, if you have areas that have dried up that haven't been being maintained because there hasn't been need. So when you have these barays and everything like that, the canals that haven't been in use, all of that water that then gets dumped on that area, what does it do when it's on dry ground? It doesn't soak in.
Soak it up.
It just fucking flash floods. Yeah. It charges in, and it might fill these barays really quickly and everything, but then what's to stop it from overflowing? Once it overflows for a little bit, then it just floods everything because it's still hard packed ground. But then as it softens and you still have water flow over dirt and erosion, it just all of a sudden starts carving gullies and stuff like that. So like the sudden rush of water into these areas start like destroying the entire canal system. And again, it's not to a point where it's like, hey, I can command all these people to just go fix all this stuff. It's degrading.
You also have the reason why we're going to talk about kind of so many factors here is because by 1327, the last known Sanskrit inscriptions are recorded for the empire. So now we're just relying on external sources that are coming in, or
that
what
dude
we
from
can,
China that you just talked about.
Yeah, what
like
we can see from the archaeological record, core samples or anything like that. So at that point in time, the practice of Theravada Buddhism had dominated Hinduism and the Mahayana Buddhism. It was favored by a lot of different people in the empire because the monks made vows of poverty. They couldn't even touch any sort of currency or anything like that, which they were starting to use as far as like trade or anything, or gold.
Is this like monks in like the orange that I'm thinking of, usually wearing the orange robes, things like that?
They don't get to live in these lavish temples anymore. They don't get to basically eat all the fruits of everybody else's labor.
They ain't poping it up.
They're pushed into poverty. They are forced to live among the population in grass huts. They have to go.
All men of God should.
Yeah, they have to go on pilgrimages.
If you are a man of God,
these pilgrimages.
You are not living in a mega mansion.
Yeah, these aren't evangelical monks. They have to go basically on these food tours because they're relying on the populace to feed them, which empowers the populace more because they're saying, well, now we're not being looked down upon by these monks and by the church. They're equals or under us. And they think that for about the last 100 years of the empire, this is when you start to see the depopulation of Angkor. And we talked about it a lot during the Mayan episode because we have these giant Mayan mega cities, I guess in their scale, 80 to 100,000 people that are living in these cities that just kind of seem like the people disappeared. And it really wasn't that they disappeared. It was because of all those slash and burn practices rendered those cities uninhabitable. So they moved off into the forest.
Yeah, and it's just a combination of these things kind of happening in very quick succession. So all it would take, if you're thinking about Angkor, so you have Angkor Thom, you have Angkor Wat, you have the entire Angkor complex. All of that is essentially being fed by these reservoirs that are around here. If that entire area were to go ahead and flood and have a very, very damaging flood, it's not like you can just turn around and be like, okay, are we okay? There has to be a portion of that population that responds to whatever the damages of that flood are. So if they lost the ability to irrigate and to do more than 2 harvests or something like that, all of those people who aren't going to be being fed now need to go somewhere else. And at this point, this is a rare circumstance of an inland, a place that doesn't have access or a maritime type like projection is still successful. But when something happens, like I said, glass cannon, very successful until it gets hit by something hard.
Yeah.
All those people that have to leave then leave for the coast. and leave for the areas where there's larger populations, which at this point in history is still going to be very coastal and dependent on the sea. And then when the population reduces, what happens to even an available workforce of volunteers? That goes way down too. You can't repair it. So it's just this slow, relatively, not historical speaking, but like over the course of decades, just this slow death, this withering of these areas. And it's not like people are slashing and burning. They're not destroying the temples. They're probably not caring for them very much, but no one's leaving because this place got burned to the ground and destroyed. It just simply wasn't a viable place to live anymore, and people migrated away from it. And then the jungle came in and was like, I guess this is ours now.
If you have 100,000 people that are regularly employed to keep up on this canal system inside of Angkor, and then you have a quarter of that population move away, and you only have 75,000 of that workforce that's able to maintain this canal system, you're only going to be able to cover 80 or 75% of the canal system being maintained and repaired.
Yeah.
So as that's falling into disrepair, and we're going to talk about some of these just massive dry stretches that they get that are followed up by these crazy monsoons, silt's going to start filling up into those canals. You're going to start getting a breakdown of the moneymaker for the empire inside of Angkor. And before we can even get to that, the main thing that kind of I would say the main thing, just because war is usually the main thing of any of this, but you see this rise of the Ayutthaya Empire, or Ayutthaya Kingdom, which is now modern-day Thailand, and it begins all of these incursions into the Khmer Kingdom, and this happens as there's uprisings around the empire already, so they're slowly killing the power of the kings because you're going through civil war while you're getting punched at. They said that of the 27 kings that ruled over Cambodia, which was Cambodia now, there was only about 11 of them that had, or there was 11 of them that had no legitimate claim to the throne. So almost half of these kings that go on don't have a legitimate claim to it, which means that they rose to power through unscrupulous means.
Yeah.
And this starts to get concentrated towards the end of the empire, which then causes a spiral. So in 1352, Thailand besieges Angkor. They take it within the next year, and all of a sudden, all these Thai princes are ruling the city. It's very hard to keep a city in a place that's as proud as the Khmer Empire. 1357, they lose the throne to an uprising. Then the Ayutthayan king besieges Angkor again, captures it again the following year. I believe that was 1358 and then 1359. Short time, they rule over Cambodia, so all of Cambodia, not just Angkor at that time. The prince that they brought in to rule over all of Cambodia gets assassinated, brings power back to the Khmer up until 1431, when finally this is the last time that Angkor gets sacked. It forces, I don't even know, this is how far off the beaten path of the Suryavas that they've gone. This guy's name is King Ponya Yat.
So they're just not even doing the Varna.
Well, it's this new form of strict Buddhism that's not flexible enough to keep any of the Varman name. He ends up abandoning the city. He moves the capital near to where now modern day Phnom Penh is, where the capital of Cambodia is now. There's so many factors that go into it besides the military pressure. The economic shift is a major one because the maritime trade industry is booming. So these inland empires that you were talking about in the beginning of the whole episode, before we started talking about the Khmer Empire, if you're moving towards the sea, this trade that's going on between India and China through there, you're going to be able to sell your wares better on the coast than you are inland.
And it's not only just about you selling your stuff. If ships are coming in and all of that trade is then driving your stuff out as well, the stuff you're bringing in, they're not going to sail any further than they have to. Fuck, if the reason they're selling this far is because this is the closest place that will buy this stuff and give them the best price, they're not going a mile further than they have to. So to expect them to then go up the Mekong and then potentially go up the, I forgot the name of the river now.
The Tonlé...
Tonal, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But to go up there to then deal with them, no, they're not going to be doing that. there was a time when it just wasn't as important to have that maritime access. And it comes to that again, this place just existed in such a sweet spot and thrived for such a long time, but it was just because conditions were very right for it, I guess.
Yeah.
And that time was not to last forever.
No, and they also had the ability to go up and down the Mekong, so they were able to get the inland trade. But when that's not as necessary anymore and you have these major centers of population that are on the coastline because of it, you got to get with the times. You got to be able to move it. I think that what you were talking about earlier, this environmental instability, it's so kind of perfect for what's going on as far as the downfall goes. The 14th into the 15th centuries, I believe from what I heard, we haven't ever talked about the Little Ice Age. I think we've brought it up a couple times, but it was a cooling pattern that went on in the 14th and 15th centuries, and they were getting through cutting down trees and looking at the tree rings. I believe that in drought, tree rings get much tighter.
Yeah, and then they're thicker in the wet years. Yeah.
So they were able to surmise that they had these back-to-back 10-year severe droughts. And in between these 10-year severe droughts, they had these torrential monsoons. And when these droughts are happening, it's silting up all of these canals. They're getting all of the very little runoff that's coming in is pushing so much other dirt and minerals and shit into the canals.
So it was everything all kind of caused. So whenever you get the access to control this water and you can move it around anywhere, you're clear cutting a lot of area, flat area that you can then turn into area for rice paddies, things like that. What happens when you run into situations of drought and then everything dries on top and then it gets washed away in sudden monsoons, there's nothing to stop the soil erosion. So all of that stuff coming down from these areas that you've clear cut is now just choking these areas that are supposed to be directing the water and funneling the water. They're choked up. And as they get choked up, you don't have enough of a workforce to then clear them out or to force people to clear them out. So when it finally comes down for a huge monsoon, a once in 1,000-year monsoon, it's not like, hey, we have these 5-foot deep channels that are, that'll divert water or anything like that. These barays can't withstand it, and they start to part of the levees and everything like that start to break. And then it just pretty much floods everything. And because of all of this silt that's built up, it's not funneling the water. It's just sweeping over everything. And again, all it takes is one crazy or two crazy years where people are like, we got to get the fuck out of here. You lose a portion of your population. And there's a strong, what am I trying to say? Enemy or rival or something like that right next to you, and they're just coming into their own like Thailand was. That's all it takes. It's timing for it to work out. Your enemy's weakened. They're in, they can't even rebuild at this point. This is when we strike.
Sometimes your brilliance can undo you, because part of the brilliance of the hydraulic system in this hydraulic city that they had in Angkor was if they needed water to flow slowly, they would build meandering canals to slow the flow of water
simulate
down.
a river and how a river can flow. Yeah.
Whereas if you needed direct water, you would make everything a lot straighter. So in these times of drought, they did a very smart thing, and they dug these canals out to the mountains that led directly into the city. So that way you don't have to have a whole bunch of extra water and everything is rushing straight to the source. Now, when these droughts end and you have these massive torrential monsoons that sit in between these droughts, if those are the only canal gates that are open, that means that all of that torrential rain is going to be flowing directly into your city from these straight canals. So you knew what to do during drought, but by the time you had to switch over to the meandering canals to bring the water in slowly,
It's too late.
It's too late. So it's flooding the city, and there's parts of the city now. This just shows you how far away they got away from the Hindu temples and just these sacred sites. Is there was a bridge that had been blown out over one of these straight canals, and they actually rebuilt it by tearing away parts of the temple to use on the bridge. And you can tell because of the inscriptions on the stones that are used on the bridge now were part of the inscriptions on the side of a temple that they had pulled off.
So it ends up being in more than one way. Again, their advancement is their downfall. They were so reliant on the water thing that if something went wrong with that, it would the wheels fell off. Yeah. But then when they were going to be invaded, their network of roads and all of that made travel throughout and commerce throughout their empire so quick and so convenient was the same highway that carried in the hostile troops in their moments of weakness.
You don't need a roadmap of war when all roads lead to somewhere that you can sack.
Exactly, yeah.
There's, I guess, a ton of old Angkor artifacts sitting in Thailand. Mm-hmm. Like they raided the shit out of this place and have held it for hundreds of years.
Oh, of course.
And much like the Mayan population, this isn't like the Khmer Empire disappeared. Even though the empire disintegrated, modern-day Cambodians are direct linguistic, cultural, and genetic descendants of the people that built the Khmer Empire. So the Khmer Empire didn't go away. It just ceased to be the Khmer Empire, and the people that made it the Khmer Empire continued to come into modern-day Cambodia.
Yeah.
And for as insane as this is, Cambodia has so much more because I believe they don't end up gaining their independence. I think they were a colonial holding of France, and I think World War II is what freed them up. And as they gained their independence, they had this time between then and 1970, so between 1945, 46, whenever they became a free state, up until 1970, that they had their own kind of path of self-determination. Well, what's going on in Vietnam right next door? You have the Vietnam War. You have communism that's coming in. And basically you have the United States and other world powers looking at Cambodia and be like, hey, no communist shit going on over here. We're already fighting up this thin peninsula of land over here in Vietnam, or this thin stretch of land. We don't want to have to come in here and drop some napalm on you guys too. We have some incursions that we'll talk about during the Vietnam War that go into Cambodia, but then you fast forward to 1970 and Pol Pot comes to power. Pol Pot's one of the nastiest dictators of all time. He ushers in a government called the Khmer Rouge, the Red Khmer Empire that he's trying to bring back. And as he's trying to bring back the Khmer Empire, he is moving all of these people out of the city into an agrarian lifestyle to try to basically replicate what they had done before.
Yeah.
But you can't go back in time, and the famines that they face end up killing about 25% of the population of Cambodia, between 2 and 3 million people. So an empire that was once the greatest empire in the world, when they tried to do part 2 under nasty dictatorship, ends up seeing a quarter of the population lost by their own leader.
So what you're saying is we may be revisiting Cambodia come Christmas time when we normally do our very happy worst fucking bastards of history type stuff.
Yep. Yeah, Pol Pot might
History's
be on the
biggest
list
assholes. I think we're kind of
For
committed
sure.
at that point now.
Oh yeah.
All right, man. You got anything else?
I'm glad that we got back to old empires, ancient empires.
Yeah.
These are so much fun, and it's so cool to be able to look back at history. Like I say, we didn't learn about this in school.
No.
We're so...
This is hiding in fucking Cambodia. Like, we're just going to dig a little bit deeper, find a few more of these. Yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be plenty of these Asian empires that we get to learn about.
All right. Well, we hope you guys enjoyed the episode this week, and we'll catch you next time.
Peace.
When you're ready to sell your business, how do you even find the right buyer?
That's exactly what Transworld Business Advisors does. With over 250 offices globally, they give you access to a global network of 800,000 plus interested buyers while keeping your sale completely confidential. They handle the complexities so you can focus on running your business.
Good deals, good people.
Visit tworld.com.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.